right, I have it up and going. You can go ahead and start.
Okay. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this early edition of our Utah State Board of Education Finance meeting. My name is Kristen Norton, and I am the Finance Chair. I represent District 15 in Southern Utah. And Board Member Straight, if you will introduce yourself.
Brent Straight, District 3, which is a little bit of Weber County and the northern half of Davis County.
Thank you. And Board Member Cindy Davis is here as well. I was going to say she stepped away, but she did not.
My glasses.
Vice Chair Davis, will you introduce yourself?
Yes, good morning. Cindy Davis, representing District 11. Nice to be here. Thank you, Chair.
Great. And I'm sure that our other two board members, our board chair, James Moss, and board member Christina Bogus will join us momentarily. For those of you that are not aware, we had a very, very, very late night last night. And I don't know that any of us had much of a break in between last night's meeting and this morning's meeting. So we are maybe just a little slower getting started than normal. All right. At this point, we don't show any public comment for our regular public comment slot. We will have some public comment a little bit later from two of our state business administrators, and they are going to address a specific agenda item. And then we also have two of our RESA executive directors who will also speak to a specific item. So I'll introduce them a little bit later in our meeting. We do have a full packed agenda today, and I'm going to get started with that right now. Our first item is an item 2.2, which is an information item. It's a recognition of progress, achievement, improvements. Deputy Superintendent Jones, I will turn the time over to you.
Yes, ma'am. Well, in the interest of time, ma'am, can we go ahead and go straight to the PMR and then we'll come back to recognition of the employees.
Okay, that's great.
The other recognitions. So can we do the PMR first?
You bet. So we should have Director Jared Felt and Project Manager Katrina Brinkley queuing up for that particular program monthly report on USIMS.
All right, thanks, Chair Norton. I'm actually just going to turn it over to Katrina, who's the program manager for USIMS, if that's okay with you.
You bet. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Jared, and thank you, Chair. Cami, may I steal the screen from you? All right. Can everybody see all right? Yes. Okay.
Yes, that looks great.
All right. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I am going to try to get through this quickly for you. I know all of you are probably exhausted. So I'm going to touch on a few changes that we made to the PMR this month. And then we've got a pretty exciting special presentation by one of my teams today. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right in here. We have made a change to this page, to this slide. As you can see on the right-hand side, we have updated the educator, finance, and student domains to reflect more of the definition of done work that the team has been doing. So you'll see more on the definition of done in next month's PMR. But I wanted to touch on this. If you have questions about this slide or any updates to this slide, any hands?
I'm not seeing any.
All right, thank you. We'll move right along. No changes to this slide. Everyone is still aware that USIMS is in accordance with 53E-3-518, that we were trying to smooth things out for USBE and get all of the data collections and reporting into one place with one login so that everybody can access it from wherever they need to. And ensuring usability, we haven't changed any of our focus working groups or any of our functional advisory board meetings. Participation and people change throughout those meetings as we get more subject matter experts, and some of them have to roll off for other things that they need to do. We're still using an agile approach to all of our development here. And this is kind of the first foray into some of the changes for this month's into the large amount of changes, I guess. Just a quick definition of what our domains are and what they include, and then another screenshot of that educator, finance, and student domain with some of the global stuff that needs to that will happen with USIMS as we approach these things. And before I move on, are there any questions about what is included in each domain, or any questions about how we've separated these things or some of the features?
I do have a question. I can see the different separations with the different sections. Are these things that are in progress, completed? Do we add on? Do we take off? How does that work?
Yes, so all of these things are what we are targeting to have in USIMS by July 1st of 2024. So some of these are partially completed, some of them are in progress right now, some of them have not been started yet. So we will get you more information on that probably next month. We're working, this definition of done is relatively new, so we're still filtering it, formatting it, and making sure that it represents the information that we need it to represent.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
No.
All right. Hey, so this is one of our brand new slides here. We really wanted to highlight some of the things that we are trying to accomplish and trying to make better with USIMS. So for our educator domain right now, as some of you are fully aware, educator licensure takes quite a few systems and different logins, and in areas where you have to go log in here and you have to go log in there and you have to go check this information there. So without the educator domain, we would continue to keep the educator ethics review and background check and duplicate license and all of those things in disparate systems and areas where you have to go check in Cactus for this, in Utah Interactive for that, and UEN for this. So our goal is really to take all of those one-time, really kind of difficult to keep track of type processes into one system so that you are able to access that information and able to do all of your licensure within one system. And I see Scott has turned on his camera. Did you have a comment, sir?
Looks
Yeah.
like he's got a hand.
Yeah, if the chair will recognize me, just
You
real quick.
bet, sir.
Okay. Yeah, so we really, if it pleases the committee, I just want to let everybody know that I'll be reaching out to the bill sponsors, Anderegg, Anderegg, Lisenby, Senator Owens, to do the deeper dive with them. Despite our best efforts, and I'll own this, there's still a lot of questions about, well, what difference will USIMS make? So I had asked the staff, based on my experiences with the system implementation years ago with the military, I won't say when, because then everybody will know I'm really old, that this was the way that we really called that out. Anytime we had to go to Congress or, go to the higher command, they always wanted us to say, okay, well, tell us what difference this system is going to make. And so that's where you're seeing the without, with, and the positive improvements. And then the other thing I want to make clear to everybody, if I may, the public, the legislature, all of you, all our great board members, is we will make significant progress and have a very good system on July 1st of 2024. However, with systems, it's always going to be improvements. It's never really done, right? I mean, when policies change, when the code changes, when your rules change, we have to adapt our systems to support you, the board, and the law, so to speak, to make sure that the systems are resources and not burdens to the field, right? So I just want to make sure that you all know that this was something that I feel strongly that we needed to add. And my intent is, and maybe we might be able to do it just in PEA in October, but we really want to be more aggressive, I guess, on a campaign and messaging of, hey, this is money well spent, the investment, and it's going to make differences in the 3 domains, which ultimately makes it bigger for USIM. So thank you, Madam Chair, for recognizing me and for that time.
That's important information. Thank you very much. Looks like Board Chair Moss has joined us and his hand is up, but Board Chair Moss, looks like Vice Chair Davis was ahead of you, so we'll go there, but we'll welcome you.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, thank you.
Okay,
Good morning. I just wanted to briefly put a note in that I am one such teacher who keeps her teaching license current. And every 5 years, you sort of dread the process because it's kind of disparate as was described. And you're like, and really by the end, you have no idea if you did it right or not, or like, I think are all the ducks in a row. And this year, mine was due in June, and it was just the easiest experience I've had so far logistically. And I got a certificate at the end that says your license is current. Printed it out, put it in my little, place, and I feel secure that I have communicated with USBE and they have communicated with me, and we are simpatico. So thank you to Deputy Superintendent Jones and for your team. I know that this piece has been a very heavy lift, and I'm grateful that it's been included. I think it will make a difference. When I ran for this spot, my first election, I thought I was going to hear about CRT and other hot button kind of issues, but honestly, people contacted me left and right about just licensing and how to streamline the system a bit. So I think you're meeting a great need in the whole education community. Thank you.
that's wonderful feedback. Board Chair Moss.
Well, a similar thanks. So Cindy and I, Vice Chair Davis and I co-chair the Reports and Requirements Task Force, as you guys know. And we just had an update from Greg Cannell, who has been working to compile a known universe of reports and requirements, where they come from, who reports them, how we get them, what's the burden, and what USIMS will do with them. And so he just unfolded to us last week, or was that this week? I don't know. Life's a blur. This massive spreadsheet that included how USIMS will affect, these different reporting requirements. And it was awesome because it put it all in one place. And as we try to figure out what we have in the current reporting system before it goes into USIMS, it's just a beautiful way to look and say, okay, is this going to go away? Does this still need some further refinement in the scope of reports or consolidation before it goes into USIMS? As USIMS develops, we'll continue to be able to ask those questions. So thank you to whoever was interfacing with Greg to help us figure out how this affects that thing, because that's the other thing that I hear a lot. Like Cindy said, sometimes it's CRT and books, but a whole lot of the time it's this stuff down in the trenches of, just make it easier for me to do my job. So thank you to whoever, obviously for the work here, but also whoever was interfacing with him to help that kind of figure out that impact. Very helpful.
Wonderful. And Board Member Bogus has joined us. Good morning, Board Member Bogus. And I see you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. May I address Superintendent Jones?
Of course.
Sir, I met with a constituent last week, and UTREX came up so often that in the conversation, and I don't maybe have full clarity, or this constituent perhaps maybe confused me, or I was confused previously. Could you just articulate for me the relationship between the two, and not just the relationship, the hierarchy?
Sure, Madam Chair, to answer Board Member Bogus's question or address the concern, I think it would be a value add because later in the presentation, we do talk about the student domain and the differences it will make to or with the UTREX system. So could we let the presentation roll into that at Board Member Bogus's direction too, so that she can see the student domain, and then we can really address her questions on the UTREX. I do understand her question, but I think the value add really is in the presentation on that particular domain, so that we can call that out. So
Would that be okay with you, Board Member Bogus?
Yes, ma'am, and I can ask any additional questions at that time. Thank you.
Thank you. All
Thank you,
right, back to you, Katrina.
I have to get that mute button back in place. Okay, thank you. That is actually the very next slide, Board Member Bogus. So I will go ahead and move forward to that one. And thank you for the wonderful feedback for our educator licensure. That was, as you mentioned, a hard lift, and the team is really proud of it. So thank you. So the student domain, there are a couple of slides here for this domain. As you may understand, it's pretty large, and there is quite a bit behind it. So really, right now within this domain, we do have a lot more systems, UTREX being one of them for the Utah data record. I'm going to screw up what that stands for. Cliff is here. He can correct me if we need to. But we do have a lot of disparate systems, a lot of different places where these records are kept, including the SISs, including a lot of areas where we have data and we're not sure where it is, but unsure as to how to integrate it and how to get it accessible to everybody. We have some data analysts and data stewards who've spent a lot of time and a lot of work making sure that it is available, but we'd like to make that more simple and smoother and within one system. So our goal is to create a standardized bidirectional exchange of the learner profile data. And I am going to pause here because I want to ensure that I do answer your questions on what I also want to, if I may, Chair, give Scott a chance to answer the question.
Yeah, go ahead, Deputy Superintendent Jones.
So, Madam Chair, back to Board Member Bogus's questions or concerns with UTREX. Will you recognize Cliff Thielen for his input on what the UTREX system does, what it was intended to do, and what differences USIMS will make to the field with the or in the future as USIMS takes on the UTREX piece? So will you recognize Cliff, please, ma'am?
Yes, thanks for joining us, Cliff. And if you could step in now, that would be wonderful.
Yes, thank you. So quickly to clarify, it's the Utah e-transcript record and exchange. And with that, it says a little bit of what its intent is to be the transfer of student data, not just into the system, but also out to all the rest of the systems within USBE and also without. So that means that we get that information out to all of our vendors for our assessment purposes, out for our snapshots, which go in for financial purposes, and that we just work with that student data throughout that whole process, making sure that it's cleaned up, that it's correct, accurate, go back to the LEAs, help them get all their information corrected to where that works. And that's the essential general purpose for UTREX, is to be that hub of data and to make sure that it works well. I see a hand up. Christina, go ahead.
I'm sorry, sir. I just don't see your screen
Oh,
anymore. If you're, and maybe that's my computer, but I lost the shared screen. Is it still up?
There we go.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
so as far as with the improvements that go along with UTREX, UTREX currently has some areas that could certainly be improved, that it's getting changed way too many times throughout its process. And the hopes that I coordinate working with the PO from the USIMS team on is to try to look at how we can reduce the amount of changes throughout the UTREX process, as our intent and purpose is to be more of a hub for the data from the LEAs rather than a transformation system, that we actually get involved in transforming the data We want to keep it as clean as possible, as accurate as possible, with still adding in everything that's needed to fulfill its processes and to identify the students for each of the different populations and other areas which are needed for it to correctly function. And that, again, the key thing is trying to simplify that process and also integrating it over into the separate system, which is the USIM system, which is, again, not connected to the current existing UTREC system yet. Any other questions?
We have a question from Deputy Superintendent Jones, or comment.
So, Madam Chair, could we go back to Board Member Bogus and ask her what the concerns of her constituents were specifically to UTREC, so we can address them as part of this piece or portion of the, this is why we appreciate the opportunity to do these drill downs, is so that you as board members can offer, you know, feedback and what you're hearing from your constituents, and then we can look to solve the problem. So
Thank you. So, Board Member Bogus, if you would like to take this time to address those concerns.
Awesome. Thank you, ma'am. Superintendent Jones, just for clarity, this particular constituent didn't have any concerns. They just kept talking about it, and it wasn't there. The way it was articulated was not necessarily the way I understood it. And so, and one of those pieces was just mentioned that, and if maybe I heard incorrectly, obviously it was a late night, that UTRECs and USIMs don't necessarily talk to each other right now. That would be a true statement. I'm watching you shake your head.
That's correct, ma'am.
And would it, oh, I apologize, sir.
Not yet, ma'am. Yeah.
Would it also be correct that if I were to, I'm going to use my hands here, this would be USIMs and UTRECs is here? That the one is above the other as far as like an umbrella data system? Or again, it wasn't necessarily a concern so much as a clarity and understanding.
Right. So, and Jared can correct me if I'm wrong, because I see his hands raised, but what we're looking for is that USIMs will subsume UTRECs. The USIMs infrastructure will allow a more robust and capability for the data to move quickly, you know, more on a real-time basis, especially the student information data that Cliff was talking about, that, you know, there will be interoperability with USIMs and the SISs in the field, like PowerSchool, Skyward, our own Aspire system. So USIMs is basically the freeway system, and that for both educator, or for all educator, student, and financial data. So the improvement really is the subsumption, or if that's a word, of UTRECs, so that the infrastructure of USIMs takes it over, basically. So that's the intent, ma'am. It's not that it'll be a hierarchical system. We want the USIMs infrastructure to be able to move all kinds of data and get rid of these legacy systems, so many different legacy systems, and put it into one highly effective and overall operationally sound infrastructure, which is USIMs. Does that answer your question, ma'am?
Yes, I believe it does. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Okay, let's move on.
All right. Thank you, Chair. I will click next on our slides here. As I mentioned, we do want to get, there's a specific use case called out here that I wanted to discuss, in which a student goes to one school and has their information recorded within an SIS. And right now that information remains with that SIS. We get it in UTRECs, but then they're unable to view that data if they ever leave that SIS, if they ever leave that district. And we want to enable a student backpack, as it's been mentioned in that legislation, so that a student can see all of that information, all of that historical information from multiple SISs. So that is the goal for this slide. Any questions on that one? I see some screens on.
Yeah, it looks like Board Member Bogus has a question.
I think you may be muted.
Thank you, ma'am. Katrina, I don't know exactly how to address you. Just Ms. Brinkley, is that acceptable?
Sure, that works. I'm not. picky.
Okay, so Ms. Brinkley, the data backpack, does that go outside public ed? And for me, the definition of public ed is very, very narrow.
I no, I I hesitate to give a, that's my understanding, but it looks like Scott has his hand up. Chair, if we may.
Yes, go ahead, Deputy Superintendent Jones.
Madam Chair, may I clarify with Board Member Bogus, when she means outside of public ed, does she mean the data in the backpack go outside of public ed, or that the backpack is used, maybe by higher ed, or can she further elaborate on what the meaning of outside of public ed is?
Go ahead, Board Member Vargas.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, sir. So does it ever leave K-12 narrow lane public ed? Is the data shift, even if it's de-identified, into anything like workplace services, to higher ed, to grant companies? I'm trying to think of all those things. I'm just wondering, does it ever leave that narrow lane?
Right. Madam Chair, will you recognize Director Felt, please? He'll be able to provide the best answer.
Thank you. Go ahead, Director Feld.
Thank you, Chair. Member Bogus, the same rules apply to USIMS as they apply to our existing system. So anytime we share data with an outside source, it has to go through the board. Data privacy gets involved. The legal team does, and then they present that to you, and then you decide who gets to see what. So nothing new will be added to this that's not already in place, unless the board makes that decision.
So are those things in place though? Is there a siphon into workforce services through the data?
I would have to check with data and statistics to verify what MOUs we have in place with different entities.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Vice Chair Davis.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, to my understanding, those would be either approved by the board or put in code. And so that is what would govern. It wouldn't be like a system is automatically sharing just with any random other system. Also, I wanted to note, I think that we have talked about this in the past, where students in other states who've had maybe more of a money to invest so far have the ability to use this even in greater and bigger ways, and they can choose to send their information to a variety of higher ed sources when they want to interact that way. But that would be something that would be later, and an upgrade that if we were able to get funding, then that would come at some other time. But I just want to very quickly say, I think one of the most important places that this is going to make a difference is for our students in special education and our students with 504 plans, because as the student transfers from schools, nobody has to go begging for, all the stuff. And so immediately students will be able to access a free and appropriate public education based on the IEP team's previous decisions. And I think that's really, really important, because heretofore, as a principal, gosh, you'd have to go begging and waiting and trying to figure out and what are the supports that have been in place for this child, and how do we get there again. So again, kudos to the team. And I'd like to tell Ms. Brinkley that I was not able to get to the functional advisory board meeting this time because I had a meeting at the exact same time, but all of your chat notes kept still popping up on my screen. So I felt like I had one foot in each, and I did appreciate the opportunity to hear and listen and learn to all of these experts who come together to help make this happen. So thank you.
And Vice Chair Davis, as one who knows about that transfer of records, I cannot put enough exclamation points after your comment. That's just so critical. Director Felt.
I'll defer to Deputy Jones if that's okay, and then I'll come back if I need to.
Thank you. Deputy Superintendent Jones.
Yeah, just a administrative remark. That first column on this particular slide should say without USIM student domain. So what Board Member Davis was talking about in that first bullet, when a student moves from one LEA to another, often disparate records are created or they don't receive the gaining LEA of the student doesn't receive. This is especially the situation with a lot of IEPs. And then too, when there's issues with the IEPs, oftentimes districts have to pay back or have had to pay back Medicaid billing funds. So there's potential here for some significant cost avoidance. I use avoidance in the sense of that, we're anticipating that we'll have less adverse findings where districts have to do it, because the records of the student will be able to as you see, a standard SIS agnostic record of the student's journey. So if the student moves, all the records in the backpack moves with the student. That's the intent here of that. What I alluded to when I was addressing Board Member Bogus is that super duper fabulistic infrastructure. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Go ahead, Manager Brinkley.
Thank you. We'll go to the next slide here. Our next slide is on the finance domain. As you know, right now, if you have experience with your financial analysts or some of your business analysts, a lot of the effort that they do is very manual. There's a lot of spreadsheets involved, including one that is pipe separated. There are a lot of manual resubmissions, a lot of, hey, can you check this data for me? Get back to me. And we want to reduce the number of manual submissions that are there and automate in every possible way. A lot of our BAs spend a lot of time going through the financials and ensuring that things are being uploaded in the right place and that they've got everything charted to the right. I'm going to say the wrong numbers. They're making sure that everything is mapped in the right place. So we want to reduce the frequency in which they have to go in and verify that information. We want to allow them to automate that as much as possible so that it's touch it once a year when the new chart of accounts comes out and they're able to keep that information up to date. We want to make this as smooth as possible for our business analysts. That's really the gist of the finance domain. May I ask if there are any questions?
I'm not seeing any questions.
All right, on to the roadmap. Our roadmap, as you may have noticed, gets updated. It's actually been updated since the slide was created. So we've gone through and done a lot of work on the definition of done and what needs to be mapped in order to achieve done by 2024. And I say that in air quotes because USIMS will never actually be done, right? We have feature work that we're working toward for that date, but we know that there's so much more we could do beyond that date. So here's our roadmap of current work that we're working on and things that will be coming up shortly. This roadmap is located within Lucid. There is a link within the PMR. If you ever would like to access that and see what the updated information is, it is there. Any questions on our roadmap?
I'm not seeing any.
All right. And the updates, quite a few changes to the slide this month. You'll notice we've started kind of keeping track of the hires per request from this group, how full our teams are. We had a fantastic month this month and actually had 5 new hires, at least 1 for every team, 2 for 2 out of the 3 teams. And for the team who will be presenting later on today, we actually have 2 more hires coming within the month. So things are looking really, really great for our hiring as of this last couple of months. You will notice that in the timelines, we have added an individual team status. The large yellow on the right-hand side, upper right-hand side of the slide, give the overall USIMS program status. But this, breaking it down by team, gives, we believe, a better idea of where each individual team is. You will notice that the educator team is red. They did hire 2 2 new contractors this last month. We have hopes that we'll be able to slide them up here very shortly. But as of right now, the thoughts are that the things that they have left in their backlog are not going to be accomplished by that date. So we are working hard to mitigate that information, or to mitigate that risk. Chair, if I may, it looks like there's a question.
It looks like there is. Thank you very much. Go ahead, Board Member Vargas.
So my question, I don't know exactly who this addresses to, is as I'm looking at the issues and risk, it says yellow, red, yellow, and perhaps I heard you mention you hired new staff. Is this something that we as a board need to be looking at, methods or processes that we can get you team members to help you do your job? It says that there is, I think, gosh, my eyes, there's more backpack related work than time for the current team to address. Is that something in terms of working through the channels that we have available to us that the board can help you address?
Or if I may.
Please.
Yes, so you'll notice on the mitigation, we are actually working on building out a second student data team because there is a lot of work left. So the mitigation for this is to build out a second team who can start taking some of that load. And we're also working on that definition of done and reducing scope as much as we possibly can to ensure that we're meeting the absolute requirements and the basics of what is necessary by that date. I see that Jared has his hand, Chair. May we?
Yes, let's go ahead and
Oh.
recognize Dr. Felt.
Thanks, Chair Norton. Just to answer Member Boggess's question as well, I appreciate her asking that question, that we appreciate the support. I think that one of the big challenges we have is finding qualified staff to hire, and then going through the interview process and the time that it takes to do that. The money's there, that's not a problem. But it's just finding those qualified staff, because we are developing USIMS in a, the up-to-date technology that requires some different skill sets than that's readily available out in the field. So again, I appreciate your willingness to help. I think that's, maybe Katrina can clarify too. I think that's been our biggest issue right now. Thanks.
May I follow up, Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
Director Felt, is it Director? Man,
Yes.
without you guys' name tags, I just struggle remembering the titles. Director Felt, is there enough money there? And I say that in terms of market analysis for salary. I don't want that to be a loaded question. It's not intended to be. Is there enough money there to pay the people that you need with the skill sets you need, what they would make in the outside of a government agency?
Chair, if I may.
Go ahead.
Yes, great question. So for USIMS, we hire primarily contract support.
Okay.
And so we do have the money, the funding there. The legislature was, kind enough to give us what we asked for to develop USIMS. And so we've got plenty of money. And then the board has been very supportive for our internal staff, our FTEs, in making those market adjustments. With the legislature, we got one of the market adjustments this last legislative session, so we appreciate that. But for USIMS particularly, we use contract support. The hourly rate is typically higher than hiring an FTE. But we do that so we can be flexible and agile as we're hiring, and then we complete something, then we have to change personnel fairly quickly. So.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
And for our IT staff, I just wanted to add, I like to add sunshine to our conversations. And so I want you to know that thanks to Utah's emphasis on information technology in our schools, we have graduated a class of kindergartners that can code. So, hey, the help is coming, might not be around for us, but we're working on it.
We just need those child labor laws to change.
Yeah. Okay. And back to you, Manager Brinkley.
All right, thank you.
Chair, can I make one really quick?
Please.
I think the reason this has been really a concern, and this is why we need to kind of keep a focus potentially on our legislative asks for market adjustments and FTEs. Because that landscape is constantly changing. Just a quick bug for that.
And there's never.
Or
enough.
plug, I don't know which.
You bet. Good point. That's another thing we can do to show our support. Okay, Director Brinkley. Sorry, Manager Brinkley.
Promotion, yay.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, I will move on to some of our financials. As was previously mentioned, we are well funded. We are not at risk of running out of our funding. Currently, we are under ARP or COVID relief funds. We will be using the remainder of our ESSER funds within, I believe, by the end of the month. And that will have used up those ESSER funds that are actually time sensitive and required to be used by November 1st of this year. And then we will move to the ARP funds, which have a timeline of November 1st of next year, I believe. And then we'll start breaking into those 20 USIMS funds potentially. So any questions on this slide or on the funds?
I am not seeing any questions on this slide.
All right, I'll just fly through these ones. This is just a quick, so you can see about how much we're costing by month. There are a few outstanding or outliers here, just based on when our accounting and financial departments needs to move funds around from one area to another. But general, this is about how much we're spending on a monthly basis. And then you can see some analysis of what's happened to each fund and when that was hit. And as we mentioned, our upcoming events, we had a focus working group just Wednesday evening, or excuse me, a functional advisory board just Wednesday evening. And that is an area where we ask anyone who has any interest in USIMS or any feedback or input or any wants to see any updates. We do a program level update for all 3 domains. So you can see what's kind of happening in each domain and get an understanding of what's going on. We are lucky enough today in that the student team is here and actually will be presenting some of the information that they presented in that functional advisory board. So we'll get to that hopefully shortly. We also have the focus working groups that happen on a weekly basis, one for each domain. Some are every other week with a sprint review in between. So if you would like to join those, please let us know. We can get you an invitation. And also another upcoming event that hasn't been added to this slide yet. We are going to be having another onsite in October from October 17th through 19th. We had an onsite here in April of this year, and we were able to take each of the teams and have them visit an LEA and talk about their specific domain with that LEA. And it was extremely helpful for us to be able to have that conversation and to be able to get that domain knowledge directly from our users. So we will be doing that again here in October. Hopefully we're scheduling time for each team to visit 2 LEAs during that onsite in October, but we invite you all to come see us. We'll probably be doing the functional advisory board in person as well as the focus working groups too. Chair, I do see a question or hand.
I do see a question or comment from Director Felt.
Yeah, sorry, just real quick. I just wanted to point out that the reason we do on-sites is because we do hire contractors and a lot of them are out of state. So we like to bring them into the office so that we can collaborate with them and get to know them a little bit better, because a lot of times you just see them over the camera. So thanks.
Great. Okay, Manager Brinkley.
Oh, perhaps not.
You're right. Deputy Superintendent Jones.
No, that's okay. We go ahead, Katrina, finish up because we need to get to Mark.
Thank you. This is actually the last of my presentation, so I'll go ahead and stop sharing.
So, Madam Chair, staff feel there's a value add in going a little bit deeper on the student domain. I'll just let Mark know. If you'll recognize Mark Wattups, he's our product owner for the student domain. Mark, you have 6 minutes and 18 seconds to do your presentation so that the committee can finish at 12:15 p.m. today. 6 minutes, 18 seconds on my mark, go.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and share my screen here. And team, I think in the interest of time that we should probably forego some of the screenshots and the walkthrough of DARE and just use the time to address any questions that the board may have. So let me go ahead and share here.
And while he's sharing, team, again, this is a deeper dive on the student domain section.
Mark, do you need me to share instead?
You can share if you want to do that. It'd just be more
Yeah.
convenient there. I'm getting to it, but go ahead.
I got you.
Okay.
There you go.
Good. Next slide. Okay, as Deputy Superintendent Jones mentioned, my name is Mark Wattups. I'm the product owner for the student domain, and our team will be presenting what we've accomplished to this point in the student domain. We'll try and go fairly quickly, as we just talked about, so I'll forego much of the introduction other than we're focused on the student backpack legislation in 2024. You'll see some of the things we've done to this point, but just want to point out that moving forward for this next year, that's where our main focus is going to be. Okay, I'll next slide, please, and go ahead and let Sartak go.
Thank you.
He's a member of our team.
Thank you, Mark. Real quick, I'll start with this page. So we had this page called a student registration, and it's a demographic page. So it was one of the first initiatives the student team undertook, at least one of the first one which I was a part of. So the intent for this was it wanted to eliminate duplicate records. So when a student, Johnny, moves from one LEA to the another LEA, his records are slow to get to the new LEA SIS solution. So when Johnny comes to the new school, they just create a new record for him, and hence a duplicate record is generated. So this has been a big problem to bring all this information together and associate to one student. So the thought was to have this intake at a state level. This could help solve the issue, but it would necessarily not solve the root problem. It would just make state more liable for capturing and pushing down this information to the SIS solution. So the new approach, we have moved on from this, but the new approach will be to display the demographic information for the student, and we'll get this data from the LEAs to just make sure that we are doing this right. So the student demographic page includes a UI page for submission and also has a confirmation page. Once the information has been added, it shows what information was there. It has an API, which is a data exchange tool, which helps the information which is saved on the cloud after submission to bring any information, share it with whatever resources is required. So the infrastructure was built around it to include multiple stage of deployment. So deployment based on different environments. And we also had a QA automation test suites in place, which would verify all the validations are done properly. The legal name has that particular length, has the particular characters involved in it. So there were some difficulties, impediments that we had when deploying. When we are developing these, there is a shared ecosystem between different domains within USIMS itself. So we had dependencies, and to move out of it, we created our own dedicated environment where we call it sandbox. We can deploy our own changes. We can check through whatever changes we have made, and we can make sure that we can freely share it with any board members or our student focus working group. We had provided this to a focus working group to give us any feedback and test it. And we collected different feedback and worked upon it. So though we moved away from the student registration page, it still serves us like a page for testing, and also serves us for a future which our team will present, a test harness, you could say, that you can test changes as well.
Yeah, thanks, Sartak. We'll there's more we can discuss there, but I think in the interest of time, we'll keep moving forward. Thank you for that portion. I will go on to Shrikar.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. So I'll be talking about USIM's homepage and the work of student team here. So as you all are aware, the USIM's homepage is shared one across all the domains, and we from student team we also use this for as a test harness, as well as the reports and analytics that come up that will be coming up in future. So, as it is a single, a single home or landing page, we'll have different roles for each of the users that come on to the USIM's home, and depending on their role, we would be customizing the content or showing the data which is relevant to their profiles. So, and we also have areas where we'll be putting micro front ends within that homepage that would be coming up soon, and role-based access control, which we are trying to introduce, and as well as we are working with a lot of student data and analytics. So that will also be showing up on USIM's homepage once we have the assessment results back from the vendors. So that's about the USIM's homepage. Thank you.
Thanks, Shrikar. Okay, next slide. Okay, we'll turn the time to Ryan to give us a quick overview of what we've done for assessments.
Good morning, board members. So as Sartak mentioned, we do have a foundation in place for rostering in USIMS for the future, but we've pivoted focus to the student backpack. Currently, we're working to associate RISE assessment results with a learner profile. And eventually we'd like to expand that out to other assessments and other features such as transcripts. The main takeaway is we're focused on two things. What do we have to do in order to meet regulatory requirements? And while doing that, how do we solve real problems faced by students, parents, and faculty members? And the answer is the Student Achievement Backpack. What difference will this make? It will provide our users with an appropriate and unified set of data that fully describes the student and their progress through the Utah educational system. We have changed our thinking process from more tech to thinking more about the business value that we add. So thank you very much.
And
Thanks,
it looks
Ryan.
like we have a question from Board Member Bogus.
Yes, Board Member Bogus.
Hi, guys. I do have a question. So under purpose, it says achieve the needs of the student backpack. For example, the RISE assessment. So in other states, there has been a competency backpack, which relates to things that are outside of academic skill sets. And I guess what my question is that a part of this backpack? Are we dealing with dispositions and competencies related to dispositions in this data backpack?
Mark, would you like to take that, or would you like me to take that?
I think Deputy Superintendent Jones has got his hand raised, and or otherwise I'll go ahead and take it.
You guys take it. You can take it.
Okay, great. So I think the answer to that is that based off of 53E-3-511, we're really focused on getting the foundation in place for USIM. So when it comes to assessment specifically, the intention is to make sure that we have assessment results in one place and in one system so that our users can access that rather than going to our vendors and disparate systems to get that information. Now, when it comes to scope, maybe you can clarify, Chair Member, or excuse me, I'm going to be Board Member Bogus, I should say. I apologize. I don't know if that answers your specific question when it comes to like what's in and what's outside of the scope of backpack, but the intention for this year is to get the foundation in place so that, as Deputy Superintendent Jones mentioned, we can expand upon that in the future. Go ahead.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
So real quickly, Board Member Bogus, the system itself will not determine competency. It will provide the data for the educators or to determine the competency. However, in later iterations of the system, we could program the system to or automate a competency determination capability. But all we're doing right now is, to Mark's point, is making sure that the infrastructure and that the data is sound so that the determination can be made at the educator level. Does that answer your question, ma'am?
Yes and no. May I follow up?
Of course.
My concern is that we're going to be measuring dispositions against what I am going to lovingly call right think and put it in this backpack as other states have done. And I want to ensure that Utah is not measuring dispositions in a backpack and measuring people against a standard of thought or a compliance to thought, and then transferring that within its inner system infrastructure. And so if we need to put protections in place against that at the legislative level, then that's fine. Then we can pursue that path. But I just want to make certain that protection's in place and that it's not happening.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Okay,
Go ahead.
I do now. I clearly understand Board Member Pagus's concern or what she's saying. So yes, ma'am, we would absolutely need some help from the board to ensure clarity on the basically what I think from your point is the utilization of the data, right? I mean, the system itself is designed to have that capability or infrastructure for uses of data, but whatever clarity or the we can provide by way of code and or rule is a benefit to us all. So thank you.
Okay, just last follow-up, Chair.
Of course.
Superintendent Jones, if you and I could talk offline and get a rule number, and then we can
Yes,
figure out how we champion that cause. Thank you, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, next slide. Just real quickly, Sri, if you can cover this real quickly as we're pressed for time here.
Good morning. So as part of platform enablement, our team has been focusing on two main items, one being the containerization of applications and the other being the infrastructure automation part. So containerization is really for the basis of a consistency of how the application behaves across the environments, be it dev, test, or prod. Usually, when we have an application hosted in local environments, it may work well, but when it gets deployed to a different environment, we may foresee some issues that could be related to some configurations that are missing. So to address that particular issue, our team has been moving towards containerizing these microservices-based applications. And with respect to infrastructure automation, so we are also trying to move all our infrastructure to code so that this can be checked along with the source code repository. Anytime there is an issue where we accidentally lose some resources, so we can just quickly spin them up in a matter of minutes just by executing the pipelines. So in that way, we'll not miss any configurations that our previous resources had. So that is what we are trying to address with respect to containerization and infrastructure automation parts. Yeah.
Thank you, Sri. Yeah, the takeaway for those of you that aren't super technical is that this really allows us, it speeds up our ability to be able to deploy new features, and it gives us flexibility, as Sri just explained, to spin up and spin down environments and ensure that we can, that the quality of what we're delivering is good, as well as for disaster recovery. So with that, I think that's the end of the presentation. If there's any other questions, happy to answer those.
I do see a hand from Deputy Superintendent Jones.
Ma'am, I just want to express my deepest appreciation for all of the teams of the domains. I know I said, 6 minutes, so good job, Mark, on that. That's not to discount or do any, for all the work that you guys are doing. Our programmers are phenomenal. I want them to stay with us as long as possible. So please, when you get that job offer from Microsoft or wherever, please don't leave us. Okay. You're all in my will. So stay with us. So thank you, ma'am. And thank you to the committee members for indulging us for the time that it took to get through this. We feel like it's a value add, and that, I just want to make sure that, my intent is to get, with the bill sponsors and really do the deeper dives with them too, to get, the message out on how beneficial USIMS will be. Ma'am, at your direction, can we go back to the agenda, please?
You bet. And let me just express my thanks as well to Jared, Katrina, Cliff, Mark, and all of their teams. And it is so exciting to get to have these sneak peeks and see this exciting work that they have done. So yes, let's head back to the agenda.
So ma'am, thank you for moving into the USIMS presentation. As you know, we also provide the update on the Utah grants. We won't do next month will be the bigger dive or the deeper dive on the Utah grants, but it is there for finance committee members to review or look at. Ma'am, at your direction, may I recognize a couple of events and staff that made progress and achievements just real quick?
Yes, please.
Okay, so there was a WIDA report. Could you recognize Jared Felt to recognize both Cliff and Leonard Brooks for what they did with the WIDA report? Recognize Director Felt.
Yes, go ahead, Director Phelps.
Thanks, Chair Norton. Leonard Brooks is our project manager, our senior project manager, and he oversees Cliff and some of the different teams that we have for our systems. Cliff has been working hard to improve efficiency in getting some of these reports out. And so I'm going to turn the time over, if it's okay with you, to Cliff and Leonard to just explain kind of what it was like before and what it's like now with the betterments that they put in place.
Yes, go ahead.
Cliff and Leonard, please introduce yourself first.
Senior Program Manager for USB IT. I just want to do a quick thank you to Darren, who organized this Six Sigma event, where it helped us identify some areas that we could do process improvement. And so one of them was WIDA, and Cliff and his team has been working hard on improving procedures and processes in that area. So Chair, if I could turn the floor over to Cliff.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So my name is Cliff Tillene. I'm with the Utrex team over the profile of Utrex. And I was the lead for our coordinated effort in the section that's working with WIDA. And should I go ahead and start right into each of the progressions for what we've accomplished?
Yeah, real quick, Cliff, please.
Okay. So through coordinated efforts, including the Six Sigma techniques, we've seen significant improvements in how we provide data to WIDA and process the WIDA results. WIDA will now get a second set of roster data right before the testing window opens to minimize the student changes from the prior 2 months. We also have, now that we're going to be receiving WIDA results a month earlier, and have an assigned developer that's dedicated to that work to focus on only processing those results and looking for improvements. This is one of the areas that we looked for eliminating waste and making sure that we were able to measure the amount of time that it took for this work to be done. Henry Hartzler was the assigned developer this year, and he's been recognized by our operations team and by our WIDA team for taking the time to improve the processes to be a higher quality and less work for the future. The WIDA results from the last few years have been available for LEAs in September. This year, they are available today. So we got the results as of July 1st, and we've already processed those results, including our improvements, and that data is now available. So we've got a significant jump in time right there of improvements. We'll be continuing to work with these improvements and are confident that our efforts will be valued by the teachers and the students by getting this information back to them and available at a much faster rate. Thank you.
Thank you. I just would like to interject right here, Cliff. I am one of those teachers that uses, well, I am the specialist in my school for this particular category of assessment. And, you know, when I look at these marginalized students and what a huge improvement this will be for their education when their new teachers at the beginning of the year have that information on the first day so that they can jump right in and help mitigate the summer loss. It's just going to be phenomenal. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Madam Chair, the other recognition we have is the rate agreement with the Department of Education for our indirect cost pool. This rate agreement is a good one in the sense of where we're at with the rates. I mean, you know, there's always room for improvement. But since we had issues years ago with the Utah State Office of Rehabilitation, we've been able to, through the fantastic efforts of Sue Mack in our internal accounting department and her negotiation skills with the federal government, get these rates to pretty decent and recognizable by the legislative fiscal analyst percentages for the unrestricted and restricted rates. If you recall, the year before, there were certain positions that were removed by the federal government. One of those positions in particular was put back in. Again, I attribute that to the persistence and the patience of our staff, both to get to these percentage rates that are, you know, again, pretty decent rates, you know, all things considered comparatively to other states, et cetera. And then also how or what positions are charged out of the indirect cost rate pool is really all attributed to the fine efforts and work of Deborah Jacobson and her team. And I just do want to recognize Sue Mack for getting us to what right is with the indirect cost pool. So, ma'am, that concludes this particular agenda item, I believe, unless Cammie tells me I missed any recognitions at this point. I think we covered them all. So that concludes this item, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to this fantastic staff. They, you know, just gold stars everywhere. I wish I just had thousands of them to throw out because we really have seen amazing work ever since I've been in finance. They just keep rolling in. So that's great news from the hard work of Sue Mack and all the others. All right, we'll now go to it looks like we are on agenda item 2.3. Or were we going to talk something about grants?
No, ma'am, that's just there for your
was just-
information. We'll do the deeper dive on Utah grants next month.
Okay, that's what I thought you said, but I hadn't crossed it off. So
No,
I wanted
yep,
to.
that's fine, ma'am. Yep.
Okay, so we are now on agenda item 2.3, which is an information item. It's our request for data and information, and that again will be led by Deputy Superintendent Jones and Board Member Bogus. I see your hand. Go ahead.
Ma'am, I do have a question for Superintendent Jones related to this agenda item. I'm happy to wait until he's finished with his presentation.
Deputy Superintendent Jones, were you going to do a presentation, or are we just opening up to the group for data requests?
Well, so we do have a couple of follow-up items here for
Okay.
Specifically to the eligibility and hazardous stops update. So if Cammie,
Okay, let's do that, and then we'll go
Okay.
to Board
Yeah,
Member Bogus.
we'll be real quick. Okay, and then I need to, Madam Chair, I don't see Sam on here. Is Sam Uri with us?
Yes.
Okay, and is Ron Sam? Or is that you?
It's just me at this
Okay,
point,
yeah, go
Scott,
ahead.
but-
Okay, Madam Chair, if you'll recognize Director Uri for this particular update or follow-up, please.
Of course, go ahead, Director Uri.
Yeah, Sam Uri, School Finance Director here at the State Board of Education. So as was requested at a prior board meeting, we've got here some of the information, the code here describing what stops are eligible for state-supported transportation. So for kindergarten through 6th grade, it's students who live at least 1.5 miles from school. For the secondary grades, students who live at least 2 miles from school. And then we have some of the special programs and things of that nature. You know, R277-600 is our board rule on this item. Any excuse me. So if you'll scroll down just a little bit, here, Cami, you know, we do want to be careful to, you know, say that we, through the rule, we do emphasize safety, but ultimately, you know, it's not something that we can always ensure. We need to work with community partners, and you know, for example, school districts don't hire the crossing guards, right? Those are the municipalities, and so we do work with and Ron Litchfield, our pupil transportation specialist, is a fantastic resource for all of our LEAs on routing and things like that. But just wanted to provide, excuse me, some of this clarity. And so we, for example, some of the things like approved minimum distance between bus stops is 0.3 of a mile. So that there's plenty of students at those stops and those sorts of things. So I'll stop there. Are there any board member questions or clarifications to this point?
I'm not seeing anything.
Okay.
Oh, go
looks
ahead.
like Deputy. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Madam Chair, a lot of this too in the follow-up, this is relevant to the board's later agenda item at 2 p.m. With the pupil transportation request for funding. We wanted to make sure that you had as much detail, at least you as the finance committee members, had as much detail as it, because it's relevant. So if you'll go to the next backup, Cami, this is really a great tool or resource for school bus route. School bus route rules for state supported funding for basically the 85%. Here's your approved cost definitions, your eligibility. If you'll scroll down, there's this piece right there in the bold, stop right there, with the school bus efficiency piece. And we'll elaborate a little bit further on this, if we have the opportunity later today, or as we progress together towards the next legislative session. On Tuesday, Chair Moss and I will be at the table for the Public Education Appropriations Committee, where we'll do a deeper dive on the recent change by the legislature to the code that requires each LEA will not exceed 85%. But we wanted to make sure that, and I really feel this is the best tool for that, is to increase understanding of at least you, the finance committee members, and the board members as a whole on these different terms: school bus efficiency, cost, miles and minutes, what reports we use to determine the costs that the districts and have, so that we can ensure that we're maximizing to the fullest extent possible accuracy in determining how much of the state portion or state funding goes to the district, and then being able to track too how much more they have to make up in a supplemental fashion to get kids from point A to point B. Point B being the school, and then B to A, back from the school to home. So I won't spend too much time in this or go word for word through this, but if you'll take, I know we're on a short fuse here till 2 p.m., but hopefully you did, finance committee members, have a chance to read through this, because again, I think it's beneficial to you later today. And then especially, as we progress, like I said, with PEA on Tuesday, specific to pupil transportation, and then also as we move together towards the legislative session and getting to what right is with the districts. Madam Chair, if I could just ask Sam if he has anything else to add, I think this would conclude this agenda item, subject to any questions or concerns by finance committee members or yourself.
Yes, go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, I just want to make the point again, and thank you, Scott, for adding to it. But the 85% is just eligible to from school transportation. It does not include any extracurriculars. It doesn't include any school of choice type examples like Ron has pointed out. If you'll scroll down just a little bit here, you know, alternative high schools, schools of performing arts. And so it really is not 85% of the costs to the districts. It also does not include the capital costs for the school buses themselves. So it's only 85% of the to from pupil transportation costs. And so there really are quite a few costs that districts incur that are just not even eligible under that 85%. And so we do that's one of the big reasons we're seeking this additional funding, flexible funding, to be able to help out those efficient districts.
Thanks, Sam. So, Madam Chair, subject to any further questions from you or the Finance Committee members, that concludes this agenda item.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to add just a quick note. I was so grateful when I opened up my backup to see this and to have this information all in one place. As you know, I represent rural schools, and I think this is in the top 3 of the most often discussed items that I hear about. So I don't know about the urban areas, but it is a big hot deal in rural. So thank you so very much for that information. Vice Chair Davis.
Yeah, thank you. I just caught, you said this would be extra money for efficiency. So this is like a bonus if you show that you're being extra efficient with your dollars. Am I understanding that right?
Madam Chair, would recognize Sam, please.
You bet. Go ahead, Director Uri.
Yes. So the ask in the funding request that will be reviewed at 2 p.m. is an additional funding item that can be used to put districts who demonstrate efficiency over and above the 85% cap of the to from pupil transportation.
And can they use it to purchase the buses?
In this case, they would just exceed the 85% cap. I don't believe we've planned on them purchasing those buses with these funds, but it would get them closer to a more full reimbursement.
Okay. I mean, honestly, in my opinion, we should be advocating for, well, if you're going to mandate that these students must be bused that live in a certain mileage, we should be paying for that 100%. You know, if you're not going to mandate it, don't pay for it. But I get so cranky with these underfunded mandates, but this will be helpful. But I didn't even realize that we couldn't use these funds to purchase buses. Like those costs are even just coming out of districts, which exacerbates the underfunded mandate. So,
but Vice Chair, but with this would seem to free up other funding that they then could apply into the buses. Would that be, I mean, it's not going to offset it, but it would be a revenue stream in.
It would definitely help, because what it would do is the money that they're subsidizing this unfunded mandate, they'd have to use less of it. But even still, it just frosts me.
Yeah.
But can I just ask a really quick question on the efficiency? My only concern on this is the special education students in rural areas, because they by law have to bus a student in special education, and they could very well not have 4 riders on that bus, and they still have to do it by law. So how they can't just like come up with, give someone an IEP to, you know what I mean? So how does this negatively sort of skew for our rural folks on that special ed piece?
I was of the understanding maybe special ed had its own set of rules.
Well, it does, but it says you have to have at least 4 for any of it to be eligible, and sometimes that's not possible in a very rural settings.
Right. So if you look at the fourth, well, let's see, the fourth bullet under 53A, 17A, 127. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, that's in code,
Yes, ma'am.
so we
Yep.
can't,
Right. So we would need a code change, ma'am.
okay,
Yeah.
all right, well.
But this is precisely why we wanted to make sure you saw this, is so that you as committee members or board members could, as we progress, into the 2 p.m. session today, and then, we'll have time and opportunity. Again, Chair Moss and I are briefing the PEA on the pupil transportation, our recommendations on the formula. But if we want to be more specific in that, we'll have more opportunities to do that with the legislature as we move together towards the next session.
I saw it there, I just was not, I
Oh, no, you're
apparently am
good.
not processing on all 6 cylinders today.
I think we're all pretty tired, man. But yeah, no, I'm with you. We're with you. I
Thank you.
understand what you're saying. Yes, ma'am.
And Madam Chair, if I just, that last bullet on the page, wheelchair riders are multiplied by 4.
I did
So,
see, that's
okay.
helpful, I think, thank you.
Board Member Bogus, question or comment?
Yes, ma'am. So this agenda item, I would like to address Superintendent Jones, if that's acceptable.
Of course.
Superintendent Jones, as a request for data and information, just a little bit of context. I have a number of constituents, and personally, I am deeply concerned about the misinformation that has been propagated in the public sphere with regard to the Utah Fits All Scholarship. And I get many messages about this because we have an organization that has a quote pre-application process, despite the fact that the RFP has not been released and there is no contract for a vendor. I've researched this through our agency, and I'm wondering, has the workload that this misinformation has caused our agency, is that increasing, decreasing? What is that looking like? And perhaps maybe even the question, what are we going to do about this? Because I've reached a point where I'm very, very, we'll just put a third very, because I have no adjective for that. I'm very concerned about people's data going to an organization that infers that they are this program manager, and that people have some sort of, I think you understand what I'm saying.
I do, Madam Chair.
Go ahead, sir.
Okay, so yes, I'm tracking everything Board Member Bogus said, and her concern. Clearly, it has increased our time and attention of staff to it. I may not have all the details myself. I do know that the superintendent, the chief of staff, we've been working with the AAGs. So if it pleases Board Member Bogus and the committee, I can take this as a request of Board Member Bogus relevant to this agenda item as a request for information, and follow back up with her and you, the Finance Committee. I'm not necessarily saying it'd have to wait till next Finance Committee meeting, but this is certainly why we have this agenda item on there. I would need a little bit more time, though, to answer the question, or the specific question of what are we doing. I know that we've discussed, but I would need time to consult with the superintendent, the chief of staff, and the AAGs on what we're doing about that particular situation as described by Board Member Bogus. Madam Chair, does that help with the request or concerns that Board Member Bogus has brought to us today?
It certainly does. Thank you. Go ahead, Chair Moss.
Gonna add, I've been contacted by the organization and reiterated the concerns that our office has expressed. Ryan Bartlett made a statement, and so I reiterated what he had said. There's concern. We've also raised it with legislative leadership. So in that discussion, Deputy Jones, about following up with this, we have been having those discussions.
Powerful team here. Good job, everybody. Thank you. All right, it looks like our next agenda item, 2.4, is an action item. This relates to our 277-484 data standards. It's an amendment. And is Director Rasmussen with us?
Yeah, no, ma'am. I think they're still over in, this is why we put
Okay.
the information items first,
Yes.
to try to give them time in the other committee so that they could join us. Let me,
May I ask a question while we're transitioning here?
Yeah, let me just try to figure out where we could go when we're finished. Is Assistant Superintendent Nielsen or Licensing Coordinator Height or Specialist Katie Hill with us? Are they still on the other side? They don't have standards today.
Yeah, I don't know. I think they're still in licensing though, ma'am.
Okay, all right.
I don't know.
let's go
Well, no,
ahead with
Malia's here.
Okay,
Yeah. I see Malia's name, but maybe she might be listening in on the other committee.
okay. Let's take Board Member Bogus's question. And how about Advisor Newey? Is she here?
I think they're still over there.
Strike one, strike two, strike three. Great. Go ahead, Board Member Bogus.
Thank you, Chair Norton. In agenda item 4, we have 2 drafts to be reviewed by the committee, but in particular, draft 2 doesn't seem to have the change in language, the color-coded change in language from draft 1. And I have looked at it, and I'll just acknowledge that I'm tired, but I don't see the difference between draft 1 and draft 2 in this moment. There seems to be very few changes to both drafts from what is already existing, but I'm just wondering if someone can help articulate that for me so that I can understand better and what draft the committee intends to move today.
Yeah, that's something that, thank you for bringing that up. When we get Director Rasmussen on here, we can ask him to differentiate for us between draft 1 and 2 and where we want to go with that we can just start him right off with that. He usually has that highlighted, maybe it's not on our draft, but he will know line and word which ones they are. So I made a note of that, and we'll have that ready to go when he is here.
Thank you, ma'am. I do appreciate that. And it's usually on there, so I couldn't. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving down the list, do we have Christy Schrack or Nathan Ock with us?
Chair. Director Rasmussen is here now.
Oh, okay. Well, then let's do that. Okay, Director Rasmussen, before we get started, I don't know if you heard that discussion between Board Member Bogus and myself, but on action item R277484, would you please call out the differences between draft 1 and draft 2, and then let us know which draft you recommend that we carry forward to the full board?
Draft 2 is the recommended draft, and I'm just trying to, I need to pull it up so I can remember what we.
Sorry, and I just saw that on my action. Yeah.
So
Okay.
I can remember what we changed. There were not.
Yeah, Ben, there, if I may, Madam Chair, Ben, we got rid of some of the old definitions, and then we also added specificity on teacher data. One of the issues we're having, or have had with the LEAs is reporting first year teacher salary data. So that, when we're asked, what's the average teacher salary for first year teachers, things like that, we're not able to provide an accurate amount because we're missing significant data from not from all of the LEAs. It's my understanding from Kristen, but that was the basic gist of this amendment to 484, was getting rid of older terms and then making it more clear that the LEAs are to provide us teacher data. More specificity with the requirement for teacher data. Thank you.
Yeah, and I can't specifically remember the changes we made between the 2 drafts. I think they're pretty technical. I don't think there was anything substantive in the changes made.
Okay.
It was feedback based on wording from Board Member Lear.
Okay, Coordinator Height, you had your hand up?
Yes, ma'am. I'm just here to answer any questions. I heard my name and so ran on.
Okay, just good. Thank you. That will be the next action item, but thanks for checking in so that we know that you are here now too. All right, so Dr. Rasmussen, I'll just turn the time over to you to introduce and discuss 484.
So thank you, Chair. Ben Rasmussen, Director of Law and Professional Practices. I think Scott, Deputy Superintendent Jones, has already basically given you the summary here. We did change some terminology in the rule. We did add the provision on the teacher salary and assignment data, and then we updated a couple of the deadlines in the chart that's incorporated by reference. So those are the changes in the rule.
Okay, if there's any questions, let's go ahead and address those at this time. If not, if someone will bring forward the requested motion or the recommended motion.
I can.
Thank you, Vice Chair Davis.
Great. I'm not, will someone put it on the screen?
Here it is.
I move that the committee approves R277-484 draft 2 on first reading and forward it to the board for approval on second and final reading.
Okay. Seeing no questions, board members, let's go ahead and please vote. Board Member Straight, did you already vote?
I'm trying to find where that is.
Okay.
Oh, I had to make my full screen. Okay. There we go.
All right. Well, now I lost you, so let me find you.
While you're doing that, can I give a quick shout out to Dr. Height and her team on licensing, because I didn't see her previously when I was thanking Dr. Jones for all the improvements in licensing, and Dr. Height and her team have been working tirelessly in that arena as well. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Okay, it looks like the voting was unanimous for 277-484. Thank you, everyone. And we can now move on to our 277-629, which is the paid professional hours for educators. There's some amendments to that. I show that Policy Advisor Elise Newey and Assistant Superintendent Darren Nielsen, along with Coordinator Height and Specialist Katie Hill. So whoever would like to take the lead from that, go ahead.
Wondering if Dr. Height would like to. I know she's done a lot of communication with the field about potential changes to this rule.
Thank you so much. Okay, Dr. Height.
Yes, happy to do so. Thank you. Malia Height, I'm the Executive Coordinator of Educator Licensing. And this rule is in reference to the paid professional hours for educators that was originally one-time funds out of last session 2022 and was amended in this most recent session to include some options for educators that start the school year after the first day of school. And so this allows them to participate in this program and to be paid. This board rule amendment comes out of feedback from the field, specifically our HR directors at our LEAs, that we're seeking some additional clarity around who qualifies for these funds and in the conditions for when the funds are available. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. Board Member Bogus.
So sorry. My question for Dr. Height is, okay, so as you articulated, line 16 through 18 was a field request of the USBE. Is that true?
It was to align with what is already in code, but to provide more specificity around which positions qualify for that funding, because the wording in the code is a little more ambiguous. And so this allows us to really refine and define for the field.
Okay, so then when it says, or another certified position that works 50% or more in a school building, could you define what that might be? Because I want to make certain that what is in my head is what you mean.
Sure. So each assignment that's in Cactus has a category that's defined as whether or not that assignment is a school building assignment or maybe a district office assignment. And so somebody who perhaps is half-time teaching a course in a school, maybe they're teaching 3rd grade at a school, and then the other time, perhaps they are working in the district office, providing some additional administrative services. And so this individual, because of their 50% more assignment as a teacher in a school, would qualify for these funds. But somebody who works only in the district office and isn't working in classrooms with students is excluded from these funds per code.
May I follow up, Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so as I read, sorry, I'm trying to scroll on your screen. I'll scroll on mine instead. So as I read this, then this money is not going to social workers or family liaisons, regardless of whether or not a credential is required. I have a little consternation even about instructional coaches, and I know that they have value, but my understanding was that the legislature intended for this to go directly to frontline educators. And I want to make certain that we are honoring the intent of the legislature in this amendment and this draft, and then also to just have clarity on who it's not going to or who it should not go to.
Chair, if I may.
Please.
So the instructional coach is a new assignment that we have defined as somebody who is in the classroom more than 50% of their time. And so if that individual is not on the front lines in the classroom working with students, then they would not qualify for the assignment of instructional coach.
May I ask a follow-up question?
Let's let kind of spread it around just a little bit. Let me move over to Board Member Straight, and then I'll come back to you.
Thank you, ma'am.
So if it's okay, let's have Dr. Thronson and Elise go first.
All right.
Thank you. Jennifer Thronson, Director of Teaching and Learning. In terms of what we submitted to the legislature on the fiscal note related to this, these roles that are in this rule match that fiscal note. So we're not adding roles that they weren't clear that that is who we would be providing these stipends to. So instructional coaches were part of that initial list submitted to the financial folks up on the Hill.
Thank you so much for that clarity. And by the way, welcome, Dr. Thronson and Elise, we appreciate you joining us. Did that, let's get back now to Board Member Boggess. Did that answer your question, Board Member Boggess?
Yes and no, I'm still not fully, I understand split FTEs. I just don't understand what, quote, another certified position. If it's librarians and instructional coaches, I just think that's broad language that could lead to an abuse of funds. That is my concern.
Dr. Thronson or Policy Analyst Newey, can you answer that?
Malia would be best for that question.
Oh, thank you. Okay, Malia.
Yeah, so as Cactus is our data warehouse that holds all of these educators and their associated assignments. And each of the assignments has a category, an educator category that says whether or not they're in the school working with students, or whether they're in an LEA, or are they school administration. And so all of those positions have categories, and that's how we determine whether or not the individual in that role qualifies for these funds. So if somebody is working and has the assignment of a librarian, instructional coach, perhaps they I can provide a list at a later time when I can get into my database and provide you with all of the positions that would qualify under this role. But those are hard coded into our database system. So that's our way to ensure that the correct individuals are receiving these funds.
Okay, so there's a check, if you will, within our internal controls that won't lead to an abuse of this stuff, and it's preserving it for classroom educators first.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That does answer my question, Chair Norton. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Board Member Straight, thanks for your patience.
Yes, and I appreciate that clarification. Let me ask a question, because in our service centers, I was visiting with a behavior analyst down at Ursa, and they didn't qualify because they were assigned out of the office for the service center. But really, they spent more than 50% of it. In fact, they spent almost all of their time in schools. They had 25 behavior aides that worked underneath them, and they were the specialists that traveled around. And they were actually housed in a completely different city, and they had a service center car, and they each day would drive to the schools and give their professional help. So would that person now be qualified to receive these funds?
Dr. Hyde?
Yes, so board certified behavior analysts, or BCBAs, are individuals who have specific training around behavior and behavior management and those kinds of things. They're licensed through the Department of Occupational and Professional Licensure, DOPL, and the board has thus far decided that those individuals are not educators and do not have educator licenses. And so their assignments provide services to schools, similar to school nurses. They provide services to students, but they're not considered educators and do not have educator licenses.
Okay. What about an instructional coach assigned to a regional service center?
If they have the assignment of instructional coach, which indicates that they more than half of their time is in a classroom working with students and working with their teacher, then they would qualify for these funds, even if they were assigned at a regional service center.
And that's something that we are bringing up today for policy request change for the RESAs as part of our policy. You'll hear about this afternoon and legislation.
Yeah, I guess I was aware of that, but so that legislation would be pivotal to this as well. Okay. Yes. That's what I wasn't aware of. Thank you.
Vice Chair Davis.
A quick question and then a motion. Did we, last year there was some discrepancy because some LEAs were holding straight to the line and not giving this money if the educators didn't get their plan in by the first day of school. But then there was a legislative request to extend that for a week or something. Did that pass? And so did those people retroactively get their funds last year, those teachers? To our knowledge?
I don't have that information. I know that the law changed to allow for a prorating of those hours. I know that Katie Hill, our instructional coach, is online, and she might be best suited to answer that question.
Thank you. Let's recognize Katie Hill.
Hi, I'm Katie Dewey Hill, Quality Instruction Coordinator. The money was allotted to the to the LEAs, and I know that some of them ended up with more than they needed because not all the hours were used. And so some of them used that to cover retroactively some of those people because that were coming on later as far as how many hours they would qualify for. So I believe that everyone that qualified received the funds they needed, to my knowledge.
So, okay, so the teachers who just didn't get their plan in on the first day of school still got their compensation for the hours worked.
I hadn't heard of anybody not getting that, to my knowledge.
Yeah, if you did not it, you'd find some met the letter of the law and some didn't. So, but I'm not.
But I think that was
because it was such a mess and it was the first time and there was kind of some confusion amongst the educators. And I'm just saying it would have been unfortunate if those who were trying to keep the letter of the law got punished and those who were trying to grapple with it, their educators got their funding. So that helps me a lot. Thank you so much. I have a motion that the committee approves R277-629 draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
All right, so the motion before the board here is that, the committee approves R277-629 draft 1 on first reading and forwards to the board for approval on second and final reading. Committee members, if you'll go ahead and please vote. All right, that looks like that is unanimous. Thank you very much. All right, thank you. Let's move on to our next agenda item. That is the early college programs amendment. Action item 2.6, and that concerns R277-701. It looks like Elise Newey is with us again for this particular item.
Hi, thank you, Chair. Elise Newey, Policy Advisor. So these amendments come to you because of some changes to legislation, which updated the IB funding policy for early college programs. We have both Christy Schreck here and Nathan Ock to speak to this if you have any questions.
Wonderful. Board Member Bogus, go ahead, please.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Newey, I am looking at these changes. In particular, I'm looking at 64 through 68. And my only question is, the new language doesn't seem to be related to the old language. And I know you said these are changes. Is that just semantics? Or, because for example, 67 and 68, the old language is extracted and the new language has nothing to do with. I want to make certain that we're not getting rid of stuff that we need and that we're addressing all that we need to do and that was not an oversight.
If I may, absolutely.
Yes.
If Christy or Nathan are here, they have a better understanding of these and could speak to that question, I believe.
Chair, if I may.
Yes, that would be great. Thanks, Christy. Go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate you asking that question. The language change is coming about because every year the IB programs have an expense. They have to pay for the IB programs, whether they have one student or whether they have 1,000 students, right? So with that in mind, the new funding would be a baseline funding to support those IB programs at each one of the schools. So the funding would be based on the programs, not the amount of students.
Okay, so that makes this make more sense to me. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
You're welcome.
Tara Moss.
Yeah, quick related question. Would the money go only to those students who are in social economic disadvantage, or would that just be the amount of apportioned funding and then they could dole it out as they like? kind of like maybe the at-risk student funding. How specific is the direction on use of the funding?
Chair, if I may.
Please.
Thank you. So the funding would be in two folds. There would be the funding that goes for the baseline funding for the IB programs, correct? And then the additional would be priority IB funding. And that would go to the high schools to receive funding to cover the cost of the IB test or the fees for the socioeconomic disadvantaged students. So the funding would be in twofold.
Follow-up?
Yes.
Thank you. My question is whether the money goes only specifically to those students who are in economic disadvantage, or whether the number of students in that situation are just used to determine the funding amount and then they distribute it across their students. Does that make sense? Is this funding specifically and only for those students who are disadvantaged for purposes of paying for the test?
The priority funding is for those high school students that are socially economic disadvantaged. I see Jennifer has her hand up. Perhaps she has more information to share.
Got it.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Dr. Johnson. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, so the way we calculate it is the latter point that you brought up, Board Chair Moss, is like the money is based on the number of students, and then they are allocated that money to pay for assessments to support students that are disadvantaged income-wise. So it's a little bit of both.
Got it. Okay, but it does go to those students rather than others. It's not just used to determine the funding amount. It goes to those students. Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Board Member Bogus, question?
Yes, ma'am. I guess I'm not clear in line 67 and 68. How is that determined? Is that like an internal check and how does one determine socioeconomic advantage? Free and reduced lunch application, fee waiver? I guess I'm not really clear on how it's determined that our schools need this money and then we dispense it to them.
Chair, if I may.
That would be wonderful. Thanks so much, Christy.
My understanding from the meetings that we had internally with our data people and Jennifer and some other coordinators, we got this information from our data team, and they were using information from the UTREX system to help understand how many students at those schools needed the support.
So what I'm hearing you say is and obviously this is a extrapolation, is that in UTREX, we've tagged our kids who've asserted that they need financial assistance in some way, and we're storing that in a database system?
I am unaware of that particular detail as it relates more to the data specialist team. I think Nate has his hand up.
Yes, Nathan Ock, would you please weigh in on this? Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Nathan Ock, I'm the STEM coordinator and now the PCBL specialist, former early college specialist. Board Member Bogus, I think the answer to your question lies in the reporting that IB programs will be sending to us this summer. So, and this actually applies to both AP and concurrent enrollment circumstances as well. And so the way that the allocation associated with students experiencing socioeconomic disadvantages is kind of identified is that they're sending accounting to us related to the amount of money that they spent on fees and paying for kind of supports for students who experience socioeconomic disadvantage. Fee waiver status is the most consistent way that communities are doing that. There are a few communities that are also using free and reduced lunch, but because of the pandemic shifts in the way that data, the accuracy of that data, almost all communities that I've spoken with are using mechanisms associated with fee waiver status. And so when that accounting is sent to us within the reporting mechanisms, we'll do the allocation this fall associated with the kind of off the top funding will be determined based on those accountings for how much communities spent on paying for fees And then the old allocation mechanism will be used for all of the money that's left over after that.
Okay, that makes more sense to me. Thank you. I appreciate that. Just for clarity, Chair.
Yes.
So we're not asking our schools to disseminate, how do I want to put this? We're not asking them to do a bunch of extra paperwork, basically. This is just, they send you, okay, I'm seeing some head shakes. I have no more questions, ma'am. Thank you.
Great. Dr. Thronson, would you like to go ahead and weigh in on some of these?
Yeah, I was just going to clarify on how we get the data. So the data comes from the free and reduced lunch data from October 1 of the previous year to make the allocation for the coming year of what percentage of students did they have that qualified, and then that bases the formula for the following year. So it's not like they're sending a list of kids in, it's just based on the data we get from UChex.
Great. All right, seeing no more questions, I'm ready for a motion.
Oh, wait, I do.
Oh, go ahead, Vice Chair Davis.
Sorry, I thought I had put my hand up and I guess I didn't. I was just waiting. Yeah. So I don't know. Some of you remember a few years ago when this was a big brouhaha and we had a big public hearing. Help me understand that this isn't the same thing that was. So is this, what we said then is, let's not reduce the funding that everybody's getting now to redistribute. Let's go and seek additional funding so that those who have been working to build these programs so long don't get all these funding cuts, that instead they're able to maintain what they're doing. And we seek additional funding to provide for opportunities like this, to pay for exams and things like that. So help me, just help me know that is what this is. Can somebody help me?
I'm happy to help, Chair. If
Go ahead.
Because I know we got rid of the cap on the IB funding, which is great.
Yeah, so again, STEM coordinator and former early college specialist, Nathan Hawk. Board Member Davis, so that's correct. Last legislative session, the legislature was like they allocated additional funds. And it wasn't tied to this circumstance, but it was kind of knowing that the language in the statute had shifted in order to have this expectation that communities were going to pay for fees for students experiencing socioeconomic disadvantage. So the kind of upshot of all of this is that the additional funding that was allocated, which was over $2 million, I think it was actually over $3 million across all of the early college programs, will far exceed the amount of money that communities will be spending on paying for fees and supports for students experiencing socioeconomic disadvantage. So the original programming funding effectively was maintained. It wasn't done with one tied to the other, but that was the upshot.
Okay, thank you. I have a motion then.
Go ahead. Thank you.
Oh, I gotta get back to that page and let's do it. I move that the committee approves R277-701 draft 1 on first reading and forward it to the board for approval on second and final reading.
Hey, committee members, the motion before the committee is that the committee approves R277-701 draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Board members, sorry, committee members, if you'll go ahead and please vote. All right, it looks like that is unanimous, and that was a great staff team assist. Appreciate the help on that one. Okay, our next agenda item is item 2.7, which again is an action item. This is our 277-439, the Prevention Block Grant Program, which is a new program, and we have our policy advisor, Elise Newey, here to help us with that, along with specialist Tanya Albanese. Thanks.
Thank you so much. So this really comes about thanks to the Reports and Requirements Task Force. So this doesn't create any new programs. It just streamlines the process for LEAs to apply for programs that we already have in existence. So this block grant streamlines the application process for the funding for prevention programs, specifically suicide prevention and positive behavior plans. This block grant allows LEAs to develop an overall comprehensive prevention plan if they choose to. So it's an opt-in, and then they can apply for that funding all at once if they choose. The programs are still available a la carte, like you can apply for them separately. But if an LEA chooses to, they can then apply through this block grant. So this rule specifically just provides guidance to LEAs about what is required in that application and how funding will be decided, and provides the ability for technical assistance to LEAs from the USBE. So, and Tanya's here.
It sounds like we're trying to be efficient here. Great. Any questions? Seeing no questions, I'm ready for, oh, yes, Chair Moss.
Sorry, one quick one. I noticed they took out the excess funds redistribution. Is that because there won't be any, or what's the purpose for that deletion?
Chair, can I address that question?
That would be great. Thanks, Elise.
This is Tanya Albornoz, coordinator
hello,
for
right above. Okay. There we go.
Tanya
The one
Albornoz.
that doesn't have mute. Good. That would make sense. Let me wake up today. Great. Tanya, go ahead.
Thanks for the question, Chair Moss. Actually, that excess distribution for the underage drinking program is actually still in there. So what happens is if we have excess funds in that account at the end of the year, we're able to shift it to the block grant the following year.
Ah, I see. Thank you.
Hey, are there any more questions? Would someone like to make a motion?
I will move that the committee approve R277-439 draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
Okay, the motion before the committee is that the committee approve R277-439 draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Committee members, if you'll go ahead and please vote. All right, it looks like that vote was 4-1 with Board Member Boggess voting in opposition. Our next item, 2.8, is again an action item. This is the LEA compliance with mental health screener requirements. We have prevention specialist Michelle Knight with Assistant Superintendent of Student Support Services, Leah Voorhees, here today.
Chair Norton, may I begin, give the overview, and then Michelle will be available for questions.
Okay, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, committee. This is Leah Voorhees, Assistant Superintendent of Student Support. So what we are bringing forward for you today is a request for you to think about and give staff direction about how to respond to non-compliance that we have found related to R277625. So brief background, this is the rule related to the statute 53F2 522, and that gives LEAs the ability to screen very specific mental health conditions, anxiety, depression, with consent, of course, and they have to use a tool that you have approved, and you have approved a couple of the tools. and then also provides funding for LEAs to apply for to be able to provide services to students and families who, as a result of the screener, it is determined that they might need more support, and then the LEA has some funding to be able to provide that support to those families. So this rule requires that LEAs submit a determination of whether or not they are going to participate in the screening annually. It requires that all of the individuals who participate, who facilitate the screening, who administer the screening, receive training from the USBE about the statute, the rule, and the process outlined in statute and rule. And then it requires that all the LEAs that participate send the USBE data about their screening and use of any grant funds. So we have all the LEAs in the state that need to tell us if they're participating or not. The LEAs in the state who are participating in screening have to provide training. And then the very few LEAs in the state who then apply for money need to provide us with information about how they used the money. So we have three different groups of LEAs. And if you look at the backup document, you can see that Michelle has created a chart for you. This program is just 2 years old, so Michelle has created a chart that shows how many LEAs are compliant with each of those requirements. And the question that we are bringing to you today is, would you want us to update the rule so that the requirement for training is that every LEA who participates has at least one administrator trained, as opposed to all the administrators trained? And let me help you understand why that would even be reasonable. The training is about the statute and the rule and the funding and the process. Anyone who administers a screening has to meet the requirements of the publisher of the screening already. That's not what the training is about. Okay, so if an individual administers a tool for which they don't have the credentials or the training required by the publisher, that's an ethics violation. And that is something that if they're an educator, could be reported to UPAC. If they're not an educator but have a DOPL license, would be reported to DOPL. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about training related to the process. And we think it may be reasonable for the LEAs that are participating to have at least one person or one required person in their LEA to receive that training. And then they could support anyone else in their LEA administering the screener. You may think differently, but that is a decision point for you today. And then the next decision point is for LEAs who are actually accepting the grant funds. Would you want those LEAs who are not compliant with the reporting requirements to have fiscal consequences related to R277-114? So really what we're asking you today is, we have 2 years of administering this program. We have found non-compliance among the LEAs. Would you prefer to update the rule to reduce the non-compliance? And do you want us to consider the non-compliant LEAs with fiscal consequences according to R277-114? Michelle, have I missed anything significant that you would want to add?
Hi, everyone. Michelle Knight, Prevention Specialist and Overseer of the Mental Health Screening Grant. Leah, you did an incredible job. The only thing I just wanted to add was that July 1st deadline, that's not R277625, that's actually state statute. And so I don't know if that changes things. I just wanted to clarify that the July 1st deadline for LEAs to tell us if they are participating or not is part of state statute HB 403 from last year. And that's kind of what stemmed all of this. So thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Michelle.
I can see we've got some questions. Vice Chair Davis?
Yeah, I have a question and a motion. First of all, unequivocally, yes, we want to reduce the requirement for training to one person. That person can disseminate the information about the code and the rules back to, you know, the other people, I would think. And it would reduce, you know, some burden on LEAs. The other question is this is an optional grant. So if you're not going to do the things that are required in the grant, don't apply for the grant. So wouldn't the fiscal consequence just be that they don't continue to get the money, or is it disseminated in sort of quarterly-ish as they are showing they're using it appropriately? Like what does the dissemination look like? And why wouldn't it just be that they don't get their next installment or whatever?
Go ahead, Michelle.
Thank you for that, Board Member Davis. So to answer that, it is a competitive grant, and they receive reimbursement throughout the year. And so we could potentially change it that they have to reimburse at the end of the year after they've done their data requirements. That's definitely an option, but as it stands right now, we just allow them to reimburse throughout the year. So then by the end of the year, when we're asking for data, they've already received all of their funding typically by that point.
And that's the data is required in code?
In rule, in board rule.
In rule?
To clarify, in board rule, we do require them to report data to us. And then in state statute HB 403, we have to do kind of an overview of the screening program and submit that for the legislative report in November.
Using that data. Yeah, that's usually how it works. So that makes sense. I mean, I would certainly support withholding a portion of those funds until we get what we need to report back to the legislature on their own program. So anyway, I have a motion, and then people can continue to discuss if we want. It's just the time is getting so.
Chair Norton, could I add one thing?
Please.
To your point, Board Member Davis, we could also certainly, because it is a competitive grant, we could add a requirement in the next competition that if you have had the grant previously, you have to have met all of the compliance requirements to be eligible the next time. That is also something that could be considered.
That absolutely should be part, and I'll add it to the end of the recommendation. I'll formulate it while I'm reading in my head. I move that the committee request staff propose an amendment to R277-625 to reduce the annual training requirement to one person per participating LEA, and add a fiscal consequence when LEAs who receive grant funding are non-compliant with code and rule, and then bring the rule amendments back to the committee for discussion, for consideration, along with an amended application process for those who have finished one grant, including a requirement to have met all of the requirements. Word that in a better way than I just did. But since this is just to ask staff to go back and work on some things and bring them back, I don't think it necessarily needs to be perfect. And actually, is all of this just a request for staff to bring this back to committee for consideration? Because this doesn't need to go to the full board, correct? We can just do this internally and request these things.
Yes, you're asking us to do something and bring it back to you.
Then it doesn't need to go to the full board. I'm just making a motion that all this comes back to us next month for our consideration. Because we only need to send things to the full board, correct, that we are asking them either giving information or taking a vote on. Because this is what we got into trouble a little bit yesterday, because we spent a lot of time on one that was just an internal request to come back to committee.
Yeah, it just says that we are requesting staff to propose an amendment. Or is
We
staff,
don't really even need a motion for that, I don't think. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. We're gonna work on all this and bring it back for us to consider.
That was my understanding. Superintendent Jones, was that your understanding as well?
Madam Chair, that is my understanding. Over.
So without objection, can we have people just work on this and bring it back to committee? We have other hands up, so I'll be done now and let Chair decide all these fun things.
great, thank you. Chair Moss.
I support that. I mean, maybe we should vote just so we know what direction we're giving, but I was going to say basically the same thing. I like the idea of dialing back to one. The statute is not terribly prescriptive on making sure people are trained, so I think we have room there. As long as, there might be some need for certification that they disseminated the training or whatever. I just don't want to create more reports. Whatever we can do within the statute to not add, 2 or 3 new levels of reporting compliance. I'm supportive of Vice Chair Davis there. I would say on the data, it looks like the purpose for the data is so we can submit our report on November 1st, right? And so if we have wiggle room there as well, that, we ask for it by July 1st, but as long as they get it in time for us to submit by November 1st, I would be in favor of also providing, that wiggle room. I guess the basic theme would be, let's not go beyond what the statute mandates, as long as we're, assuring ourselves that they do what the statute requires. I'm in favor of keeping it as loose as we can while fulfilling our obligations. So I think that's consistent with what Vice Chair Davis has said. I'm doing my own version of rambling, but I think we're both coming from the same spot there.
Yeah, and just a quick follow-up, that's fine with me if they're not going to apply again. But if they're going to apply again, they have to have it done by July 1st because
So what's the deadline to reapply?
July 1st. Well, they have to say they're going to use it by July 1st in code.
So if they say they're going to use it again, is there a more stringent application process that comes after that?
Leah or Tanya, I'm sorry.
Michelle.
Sorry, Leah or Michelle, can you help us with that?
Thank you, Chair.
Yes. Thank you, board members. So after the LEAs determine that they are participating by July 1st, then they can apply for the grant funding afterwards. This year, we had that deadline as July 14th. We try to disseminate it before the school year starts, but there is no date requirement for the grant funding. Just the statute July 1st date is the only one. Thank you.
Well, I agree. If they're going to reapply, they got to submit the data. Maybe they do it with their grant application. I support getting what we need, but just giving them flexibility if they're having trouble getting it in. So I support the motion.
Thank you. Board Member Bogus.
Yes, ma'am. So I believe my question is perhaps for Ms. Voorhees. I'm wondering, with extremely large school districts, I think one of our school districts has over 80,000 students, is one enough? And perhaps maybe we write the rule with a ratio, 1 for every 10,000 students, 1 for every 30,000 students even. I just am wondering, is 1 enough? And if so, should that be a consideration? And perhaps in terms of internal turnover, also, I'm thinking if more than one person in a district is trained, then if someone moves to a new position, or I'm just thinking through to the logical conclusion. And I genuinely would like to know, do we really think that one is enough? And so that's my question there. I understand about information dissemination, but that would be a check on the information dissemination too, if two people are trained. So it's just a question. I think it's for Director Voorhees, maybe for Ms. Knight. I'm not certain.
Chair Norton, would you like one of us to respond, or would you?
Definitely would. Thank you.
Okay, I'm actually gonna turn it over to Michelle, because she's been interacting with the LEAs for this program.
Thank you, Leah. Thank you, Chair Norton. And thank you, Board Member Bogus, for that question. So I would say we could definitely write in a ratio. From what we've seen over the last 2 years is typically it's the counseling department or psych department or social work department, I should even add, that are doing the trainings. And what their feedback has been is that this is information I've done in my Doppel class, and this is very well-known information. Also, for those who are coming up on their 3rd year of doing it, they're getting very frustrated that they even have to participate. And the course is open, the training is open all year round for them to re-access as often as they'd like. And so truth be told, I'm not sure what the ratio could or would look like, but I do feel that just having one per LEA, or even maybe one per school that is participating within the LEA, would suffice.
Hey, Vice Chair Davis.
I would suggest we look at language that says one or more per LEA. That would allow our tiny LEAs to send one person. It would allow our large LEAs, if they feel like they need more to cover it, to send more. But these large LEAs have one assessment director, and they have kind of a phone chain, if you will, or an email chain of all of their coordinators in their schools, and they disseminate the information for really all assessments. So that has seemed to work fine in the past. I don't think we need more than that for this particular thing.
Okay, can I clarify that, Vice Chair Davis? You said one or more, and then at the end you said, I don't think they need more than one.
I don't think they do, but one or more could help with
put in the language.
If they want to send more, they can.
All right, I'm not seeing any more hands, and I tried to write down what you had originally mentioned as a proposed motion. Again, I think we can be pretty lax, because basically what we're doing is just presenting information to staff to kind of finalize an amendment. We're giving approval for this amendment. Oh, look at this. Tammy, you are amazing. Here we go. Okay, so the motion that we are voting on is that the committee request staff to propose an amendment to R277-625 to reduce the annual training requirement to one or more person per participating LEA, and add a fiscal consequence when LEAs who receive grant funding are non-compliant with code and rule, and then bring the rule amendments back to committee for consideration, along with an amended application process for those who have finished one grant, including the requirement to have met all of the requirements. Committee members, if you will go ahead and please.
I would just say one or more grants, because they need to be compliant in all those years, not just one.
Okay. So one or more grant. So we've got two one or mores there, one or more person, and then one or more grants. Okay, go ahead and please vote. All right, that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, before we go on to the next motion, I have made possibly an error. And Cami, I don't know if you can help me or if Elise is on, but back on item 2.7, and thank you, Committee Member Bogus, for catching this. Back on item 2.7, we made the motion to approve draft 1, but it was brought to my attention that the work that we were discussing was off of draft 2. Is that correct, Elise or Cami or someone that is more awake than I am?
I believe Tanya is nodding her head.
Okay.
So I
can't
believe
see on my
she's confirming your question.
Chair, this is Tanya Albornoz. That's correct. We were working off of draft 2.
Okay, so let's go ahead, committee members, let's just clean that up real quick and let's redo that vote. Hey, Chair Moss, is this one we can do?
I think you can just move to reconsider.
Okay, so the new recommended action is that the committee approve R 277-439 draft 2 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Is there anyone opposed to that? Okay, let's just go ahead and vote with our check marks. That's easier. Oh, my goodness. Anybody see board member Straight?
He has not put up a check mark from my view. Oh, there we
There,
go.
I can see him and I can see his check mark. Okay, so that again passes unanimously. Thank you all very much, and I'm sorry about that.
Chair, can I clarify
Thank you,
something
Chair.
on that one?
Oh, thanks.
I was just gonna, on the previous one, when it was draft 1, member Bogus voted against. Is it the draft 2 that, is it unanimous then for draft 2?
Yeah, it would, if you're asking me, that would be yes.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, this is an information item. It's the quarterly reports for school children's trust. And it's the annual compliance report. And we have with us Director Paula Plant and also Assistant Superintendent, Deputy Superintendent. I'm losing it fast here, Scott. Go ahead, Scott.
No worries, ma'am. Paula might try to get me later on this, but could we move the action item, especially in item number 10?
Yes.
The front, just, I mean, I think we'll make it still, but if we could do the action items just to make sure we get through those. This is an information item. It's a very important item, Paula. But if you could, just support at the chair's direction, going to the action items. We have about an hour and 15 minutes left. So, and we have, I think, 3 action items still left, ma'am. So if you wouldn't mind, if we could move that information item to the end and take the action items, if it pleases you and the committee. Thank you, ma'am.
I would appreciate that. Thank you very much. And thanks for your graciousness, Paula. Okay, so for our action item 2.10, we would like to welcome some guests who are going to make some public comment, I understand. First of all, we have Weber School District Business Administrator Robert Peterson, as well as Davis School District Business Administrator Tim Leffel. So if we could hear from both of them before we get started on our discussion.
Hello, this is Robert Peterson up at Weber. I just am here to help support and comment after Dale talks, and we just appreciate Dale and the state, your folks. This is the first time I've sat in on a finance meeting like forever, and I'm just impressed. If you guys go through this every month, this is very impressive. That's all I have to say right now.
And I'll just echo kind of what Robert said. First of all, thank you for letting us
look at this issue. And thank you for Dale's time. He spent a lot of time on this and very appreciative of his expertise and all the data that he's brought for the committee. We'll turn it over to Dale, I think, and then we can comment as Dale goes through his presentation if needed. So thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and back to you. Deputy Superintendent Jones.
Ma'am, at this time, if you could recognize MSP Coordinator Dale Frost, he'll present the voted and board follow-up to the committee.
Thank you so much. Good morning, Dale.
Good morning, Chair Norton, members of the committee. Thank you for having us today. I'm going to be presenting this presentation. I'll try to keep it brief. There's a lot to go over. Chair, can you see that? I just wanted to make sure.
I can. Excellent. Thank you.
Okay. So in May, the Finance Committee asked us to review this program, the Vote and Board Local Levy Program. This is a chart that I think best represents what the program's about. It's a guarantee program meant to equalize funding above and beyond the basic school program, which is a fully equalized program, and to account to a certain degree the differences in property tax wealth between the districts. So if you can see in this graph here, you have Park City and Rich on the left, and this is an amount that they can generate per WPU per tax increment, and you can see that that's many times higher than San Juan and Tintic on the right. And so what this program does is for those who levy a certain amount of voted or board local property tax levies, then they can qualify for a certain amount of state funds if they don't generate that locally. So to kind of give you an idea of funding amounts, we're talking about over $1 billion and about $250,000 from the state. That's these lines right here above the green, and the green bars are estimated to be around $924 million. So because there are these two pieces and the state backfills the local contribution if it's not generating enough for a school district, then if the local contributions are going up, the state funding contributions go down, and vice versa. To kind of give you an idea of scale, for example, this last year, we needed about $60 million as a state, less than projected, to meet the guarantee rate that was set by the legislature. Technically it's set by USBE, but it's based on what the legislature appropriates. So hopefully that can give you a very high level view of how the program works. There's a lot under the hood, but that's kind of the basic mechanism. And what's really important for this discussion is how do we measure local revenue? That's really the key question there that's driving a lot of our conversations about how to improve the program. So why are we bringing this to you? I wanted to show you kind of now, so this is just an example of what I just showed you, and this is just looking at the state allocations. And I want to be clear that this is not showing, this is not including the local revenue side, but you can see that there are big changes in this last year in 23 of between the legislative estimates, which are initial projections, and what the final allocations that school districts received. To kind of give you a sense of scale, and it really depends by district. Some districts generated slightly more in local revenues than they went down in state revenues. Some generated slightly less. Weber, for example, their state revenues went down between legislative estimates, the final estimates, by about $13 million. When you account for the increase in local property taxes, it went down net about $5 million. And Robert can talk about that a little more. But these changes do create some challenges for districts to try to plan as they budget. And it's especially because of the timing of the funds, and I wanted to show that to you. So, I've shown this before about the major kind of milestones throughout a year for the minimum school program. We come out with legislative estimates right after the legislative session based on what the legislature passes. Those are the amounts on which school districts and charter schools base their budgets. We update in November when we get actual student counts. And then the final updates mostly are to reconcile the final property tax collections. This kind of shows you here kind of a timeline of that for 23. So you can see that back in April 22, we had those legislative estimates. Those were that first column amounts. That second column amounts, they didn't know those amounts until April, May of this year. So not that long ago. And you can see, I mean, the fiscal year starts in July and is almost over by the time they know those final tax collections. So it doesn't give districts a lot of time to make any kind of adjustments if they need to from these changes. So that's kind of the timing question of this, and really gets to the root of our recommendation that the work group brought to you. So here quickly are the members of the work group and others who participated with them. You have Robert and Tim here, and I appreciate them making time to provide their perspective. We also had folks, the BAs from Duchesne, Jordan, Provo, and Tooele. We had folks from the legislature and the Office of the Legislative Fiscal Analyst, and they provided some really good feedback as we went along, and then had lots of support from folks within USBE. And I just realized I repeated my own name below. I'm not the MSP analyst. I apologize to Brett Baker. I'm up there twice. I wasn't even up as late as you all last night, so I don't have that excuse. So here are the work group recommendations. I wanted to start with the big idea up front. So I'll go into a little more detail on why the calculation and just show you how complicated it is. One simple thing that we can do internally that doesn't require any policy change is to simply consolidate these calculations onto a single spreadsheet tab. And that was kind of the lightest touch recommendation that we looked at, but then we looked at more fundamental changes beyond that. And so this was, what we need, what we are recommending, that the committee recommended the board, is that that you direct staff to create a funding and policy request to do two things. First, this program actually has 6 funding allocations, 3 for the voted side, 3 for the board. And the reason why was because funding was added through different funding mechanisms at the state level. But in terms of uses of funds and accounting for 6 different program codes, it doesn't really matter at the district level. And we can consolidate that to 2 and save time on the accounting, both of the state and the local side if we do that. That's a pretty simple change, doesn't affect any kind of allocations on that side. I see there's a hand raised.
Yes. Vice Chair Davis? Yeah, I was just gonna move it. I was gonna make the motion. I assume this is the motion. I mean, I see how it's written in our agenda, but it consists of these things here. To when you're done.
That's correct, Chair. Do you want, I'll have it at the end too. I just wanted to, so that you had where I was going with the presentation,
perfect.
If that works, Vice Chair Davis.
Perfect. I will just wait. Perfect.
Okay, thank you. And then 2B is really the big change here. Remember how I was showing you the timing, that we don't have final property tax collections and rates until almost the year is over. If we were to base these calculations on 2-year prior tax rates and collections, so basically walk back the program by a couple years, then we could we could have certainty on the state side and the local side. I see Member Bogus has her hand up, Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Member Bogus.
Thank you. Mr. Frost, I'm wondering, this 33 million, is this new money or is it reallocated money? So are we giving up something so that we can have this, or are we just asking for new funding?
Chair, may I answer?
Please.
Board Member Bogus, a good question. So the 33 million one time for 2 years, and I'll go into why it needs to be for 2 years, is kind, and I hate to use the term hold harmless, but kind of a hold harmless calculation, basically to estimate what we could, what would be the transition cost. We went back a couple of years and said, okay, for fiscal 22, if we had based it on 2020 numbers, what would that have cost if you compare the two different approaches? And if an LEA received less, we added that amount so that there would be a one-time pot of money to keep them at what they were at. So we did that for 2 years, and both of them came in the low $30 million range. 33 million was the high. And so, yes, this would be new money one time, in addition to what the legislature allocates, just so that if you're a district who is negatively impacted for that 1 year of the 2 year period, you wouldn't receive that impact during that year, if that makes sense. Because by the time we transition this in 2 years, then we're back to what we would have been doing. We're basically repeating 2 years of tax year data. And that's why we need the 33 million one time for 2 years. Does that help, Board Member Bogus?
A little bit. May I follow up, Chair Norton?
Yes.
Okay, and Mr. Frost, I do have to apologize. It was a late night last night and my brain is not on all cylinders. I just want 33 million one time for 2 years. Does that mean you have 33 million to use over 2 years? Or would this ultimately be $66 million allocated in 2 legislative cycles?
Chair, may I answer the question?
Go ahead.
Board Member Bogus, it would be $66 million. So $33 million 1 year and $33 million the other year. We don't know exactly what it would cost. And so the second year might cost slightly less if it turns out that we don't need that much, and then we can reduce that second year cost. But based on our projections, it would be around the $66 million range.
Okay, and one final follow-up.
Of course.
In terms of, dare I say, priorities, I'm wondering where this would fall in priorities, and just so the board went after, if you will, all-day kindergarten and things like that, and class size reduction is one thing that we debated for a while yesterday. This is a lot of money that could go into other things. I'm wondering when and if we do this, I'm wondering where does that fall on the list of priorities? And maybe that's a board thing, but also, what's the word I want to use? Are there other things that may be more important? I don't even know if this is a question for you, sir. I'm just trying to understand.
Maybe I could add a little bit of help with this, Board Member Bogus. And then when somebody can I can see Deputy Superintendent Jones is ready right now. So I'm just going to turn to him.
No, go ahead, ma'am. I mean,
I was just going to say, one of the big differences here is that this is one-time money, and the legislature, all those programs that you listed before are ongoing, and that bucket is so much smaller, and that's where our priorities are. Really have to be careful, and not that we don't have to be careful with one-time money, but this is the kind of project that fits quite nicely into this, especially when it's going to make an ongoing impact for years and years to come. That's all I was going to add. Go ahead, Deputy Superintendent Jones.
That helps. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would just add that by way of the process that the board has taken in the past, it's your September meeting that you typically, I mean, you don't have to, but the board starts your prioritization process, right? So as we get further into this, there'll be a motion that we're going to recommend that the finance committee make for the board to approve this request, to approve this, and then direct staff to put a request for funding together so that we can bring that back to the board in your October meeting. And then it's typically the October meeting where the board finalizes your priorities, because we have to meet the requirement of the Budgetary Procedures Act to turn in your budget proposal to the governor's office. And they typically ask for a prioritization at that time. So typically your September and your October meetings is where it all gets fleshed out by the board, has to be board directed, for what your priorities are. So hopefully that helps and augments what Chair Norton just said. Thank you, ma'am.
That actually was very good from both of you. Thank you for that clarification. I do appreciate, and thank you, Mr. Frost, for your presentation.
Hey, we have a few more questions. Can I insert these right now, Dale?
Sure.
Okay.
Chair.
Chair Moss.
So partly this whole plan is a bit of a redistribution, right? Those who have excess pay in. Do we have any, unless I'm misunderstanding that, I know we've only got, primarily one district that's at the top of feeding in, but do we have any money based on the savings in distributions from last year? Because the, districts had more. Is there anything in the till that came from that on that side that would go towards the $33 million?
Chair, may I answer that question?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
So Chair Moss, good question. The legislature, because of this timing issue, tends to use this program as kind of a budget balancing mechanism. And knowing that property taxes were going to be coming in hot, we just didn't know how hot. 50 million of that 60 million, 62 million actually was reallocated to other programs in the legislative session. So there's $12 million that will be we're closing out right now, but that will be a balance in the program. The way that the statute directs, though, is it's very clear that if there is a balance in the program, we distribute that out in the beginning of the next fiscal year. So even though there's $12 million, it's going to be distributed to districts based on last year's calculations, basically, before the next legislative session. So there is some money, but it's going to be used up before the session. Does that help?
Yeah, quick follow-up, Chair.
Yes.
Will that distribution of the 12 million go to backfill any of what was lost by the districts in not getting the full 65 or whatever? Will it fill any of that gap, or is it just redistributed, sort of per WPU type formula?
Chair,
go ahead.
I may answer. It certainly will. It won't make up the full difference, but it will make up, a fifth of it, if that helps. Yeah, and so it's not based on WPU, it's based on the actual calculation. So those who are lower on that scale will receive more than those who are closer to that line, if that helps.
Yeah, so that's already been considered and this is what's left of roughly a hold harmless, but you've already sort of baked in that other 12. Is that what we're saying?
So Chair Moss, those are two different calculations. One is based on the same tax year, and the other is based on looking at two different tax years. And so the 33 million is not the $12 million allocation is not factored into that one way or the other, if that helps. They're separate calculations.
Yeah, I understood the different periods, but sort of roughly the same purpose. And so I guess what we're saying is what we had left over of the $12 million has been factored in, and we were seeking an additional 33 for sort of roughly hold harmless purposes on top of the 30, or excuse me, on top of the 12. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee Member Straight.
Yes, this seems to be a balancing act. And I just want to ask the question, so what was it that happened that caused this to occur so with such a wide swing in some districts but not others?
Chair, if I can answer that question.
Thank you. That would be helpful.
It's a complicated answer, Board Member Straight. But the basic answer is we had different changes in property tax collections relative to projections across the state. So let me take Weber again. They came in much stronger than projections, but it's not just that. It's also where they fall in that distribution, and it's also which increments fall into the guarantee versus not. And that kind of goes to a lot of the conversations we had with the work group, that there are a lot of ways to streamline the program. The problem is once you start tinkering with the actual fundamentals of the program, then you get significant changes of funding allocations that would dramatically affect districts. And so that's why we're not recommending changing the formula per se, other than the timing of the formula, which really isn't a change to the formula, if that helps.
So when you say 33 million one time for 2 years, we're basically revisiting last year's numbers. Is that correct? And filling the gaps, and the 33 million is needed to make it to where we don't have any losers, and we don't have, because if we create losers, then this plan isn't very effective. So we only have winners in this scenario.
That is correct, Member Straight. And I'll go into a little more detail in the presentation, and I'll try to go through that quickly since we only have 10 minutes left. And
I will be quiet.
Chair, could I move on? And then hopefully we can answer more of those questions. I have a lot, and I'm going to go really quickly. Oh, I see Member or Vice Chair Davis has her hand up. Did you want to ask your question?
Yes. Can we make this quick?
Yep, I'm waiting to make a motion, but does USBA have this on their, this is for our guests. Does USBA have this on their priority list? Are they supporting this?
I don't know. This is Robert and Weaver. I don't know.
I don't think this has got to them.
No.
That would be a really important piece of this.
And Vice Chair Davis, and Deputy Superintendent Jones can speak more to this, but I believe the JLC is still working on their recommendations through this month. And this is, you're the first ones to see this. We have not gone and pitched this anywhere else. And so it's, those conversations haven't occurred amongst the districts, not saying, I don't want to speak for them. But
that's helpful. Thank you. Yeah. I'm fully supportive, by the way, but it's helpful. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, let's continue on, Dale.
Okay, so let me quickly go through here, and I'm going to just spend 5 minutes. And so you're going to be like, why is he talking so fast? But just to kind of give you the big ideas that we wrestled with the task force. One, I just wanted to show you here a visual of the overall complexity of the formula. There are 6 different spreadsheets that all feed into each other in multiple tables, and the actual calculations here don't matter, but each one is a piece and part, a priority, and you have to do these in order. And this is one reason why school districts have the hardest time actually calculating and projecting out what they're going to receive. And then this is just a visual for Alpine. We were talking about those 6 allocations versus 1. So that's there's the complexity angle. I was able to, for the work group, show them what it would look like to collapse this all in one without actually changing the formula. And that alone provides some value there. And that's just more of a visual there. One of the big things that impacts the program are what we call the hold harmless rates. Basically, if a district increases their voted or board levy, and they get that high watermark for 5 years beyond the last year, so it's essentially a 6-year look back. And the intention is to give districts time to adjust, to work with voters, and to go through truth in taxation to adjust theirs so they can maintain their rates. But there was a question on whether hold harmless rates were too long, or if we went back 2 years, do we need it so long? But this was one of those issues where you make any change to this and there are significant impacts to districts. The other one is this local contribution calculation. So I just wanted to show you quickly, here's Alpine and Granite. They both have the 20 increments, so they're guaranteed the same level of participation. But because one has a higher, so Granite has a higher board rate relative to what the priorities are, and Alpine has a higher voted rate. And then if you look at their hold harmless rates, basically, if you see these 3 columns here, the local revenues under the regular board and regular voted, and then the remaining increments to get to the 20, Granite is actually contributing more on the local side because of their situation. That if, for example, they went to their voters, I don't know if it's gotten approved, or they increased to 16 increments, for example, they could actually increase their state allocations by $15 million. And I don't want to go into this a lot, but what this creates is you have some districts who know this and can take advantage of it. And then you have some districts whose local context just precludes them from taking full advantage of the participation. And so that was a conversation with the work group. Board Member Straight, you have your hand up.
So for my simple mind, it punishes districts if they raise certain elements of their property taxes.
The program, Chair, may I answer?
Yes, please.
The program heavily weights towards the voted side. So if you want your voted hold harmless rate at the 16 increments, if you don't, then that significantly impacts you. Does that help, Member Straight?
Yes, thank you.
So let me just quickly go through our process. We went through and tried to identify what are we trying to do with any kind of change recommendation, our goals. We looked at various different recommendations of what we could change. We rated things, and then we took those different recommendations and looked at them in different proposal configurations here. And our proposal 2 is what we're presenting to you, which is essentially it's the same formula, but just base it on 2-year prior tax data, which we have. So then we don't have to base on projections, and then you get certainty both at the state and local level. So that's why we're recommending that. But there's a question, why not these other proposals that go further? Well, there's still questions and not uniformity of opinion about how we should measure property tax wealth. How should we measure property tax effort? Should the system be encouraging local increases that primarily benefit the state? You know, these are questions that districts have. And then you have the whole tax policy side. You know, truth in taxation, the certified tax rate processes, even though they're not directly related, the incentives and the benefits for districts are significantly changed if we change this program and the formulas. And so that was part of the conversation. And BAs wanted to make it clear that even if we're not recommending changes to the program, that there's still these outstanding issues. And going through T&T just to maintain state funding is very difficult, is what I heard from BAs. Because voters think if we're going through a property tax increase, what are we getting for that? If we're doing that primarily just to maintain funding, that's a hard sell, is what I heard. Changing hold harmless rates significantly impacts district allocations, and changing the structure of guaranteed increments also significantly impacts allocations. So that's why we went with proposal 2 to bring to you what did we have unanimity on? Chair Moss. You have your hand up?
Yeah, I didn't mean to cut you off though. I can wait until you're through this.
Okay, I'm almost done. I know that we're almost over time. So I quickly wanted to go in a little more detail on what these mean. One, if we have your direction, and again, this consolidation doesn't require any policy change, and we can do it right away. And there was no problems with this. I think it would just be a value add for simplifying the system. The actual formulas embedded in here are still complicated because the formula itself is complicated, but at least you can see everything on one spreadsheet. I talked about the consolidate funding from 6 to 2. This is just showing you the different funding sources. And likely the right way to go would be to have the legislature transfer these funding allocations from the Uniform School Fund and the basic growth account into the local levy growth account. But that's why if we kept it general just to work on how to consolidate this with the legislature might be the way to go, because we still want to look at on the how you do this. And then most of our conversation was on this 2-year prior tax rate. This is just a visual to show you what that would be. And maybe this gets to your question or point, board member Straight. So the fiscal year, the tax year lags behind the fiscal year by 1 year. So this last year, 23, was based on tax year 22. 24 will still be, regardless of what we do, because we're really talking about 25, would be based on tax year 23. Then you would roll back the clock 2 years. And so if this went into effect, basically we would be repeating what we did this last year, which is where we got to that $33 million, because we at least have a good idea where we would land there. And then we repeat what we're doing in 24, at least on the tax year side. WPUs would be current WPUs, all of that. All you're doing is you're rolling back the tax year data. And then starting 27, 25, it would be essentially, even though it's a delay of funds, then you roll to the new system, and then you wouldn't need that one-time funding source anymore. And that's why we would need that $33 million over those 2 years in 25 and 26. So that, I think, is the concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any further questions. And then if we could also just let the BAs who are here provide any more perspective that they have.
Okay, let's go with Chair Moss, and then we'll go with the BAs.
So just looking forward to, discussions on the Hill, I would anticipate one question goes to, what you described, Dale. It's tough to do TNT just for the purpose of preserving state funding. Some of that is kind of baked into the process, right? This is to supplement when you can't raise local funding because you've taken all the efforts you can. And I assume that'll be a question, what did you do to, kind of go through TNT and show that effort? Do we have folks, and I'm in Wasatch County. Wasatch went crazy, our valuations went nuts. My taxes are through the roof. I think TNT's coming. Do we have examples of folks who have given this a shot? Again, I'm anticipating questions from the Hill as we ask for that money. What's the experience been like out in the field? Maybe some of our BAs can answer that, because it is a tough thing. It also is a question they'll ask about. You've got this bucket out there. What have you done to tap into it? And of course, it's very tough politically, right? So, yeah, I don't know if you know that.
I would defer on the experience. This is why I wanted the BAs here for their perspective. But it's just to give you an idea of our conversations, there was this conversation about some sort of more streamlined TNT light, or like a maintaining state increments kind of provision recommendation. We didn't want to go there, A, because do you really want to touch TNT? And then B, what do you get for that? And there wasn't uniformity of opinion on those things. And there's still a lot of conversations that I think BAs want to have on those fronts. It is rolled into this, but it's not part of this recommendation, which is why we were not recommending changing any of those pieces, or even the funding formula that affects the incentives related to TNT. But yeah, I think the BAs could both tell you their experiences on going through that same process. if that's helpful, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. Or anybody else, you know, out in the field. I mean, yeah, two separate things there. What efforts to use the existing TNT process, and then, like you said, that it wasn't determined that changes to that process would be, you know, the best answer. But I think there'll be questions about what the experience has been like, if any, in trying to use what we've got. All right, thank you, Sam. I'll be quiet and listen to our BAs. Thank you, guys.
Want to go first, Tim? This is Robert.
Sure. I guess I would just say two quick things. First of all, we need to remember, and Dale can correct me because he actually ran the calculation, is when we talk about a hold harmless, if we make no changes to this program, then each of the districts is going to get their allocation. And what Dale's looking at with the 33 million is, hey, what if we make these changes and somebody's hurt and getting less than that they would have gotten otherwise? Then that's where the 33 million comes into play. So if we make no changes, that 33 million is going to get spent. It's just going to be based on the current formula. So we'd have to talk to the legislature and help them understand this isn't really new money. It's just, you are going to appropriate this money. And if somebody gets hurt and gets less than that they would have gotten, then we may have to look at that. And it may not be totally new money. It may just be money they might have spent anyway. But the other thing I would say is to talk about what Dale said. We had some great conversations. We just didn't have a lot of time. And I think there's a lot of great ideas that started to come out of this committee. And poor Dale was trying to wrangle cats to keep us focused because we didn't have that long of a time. But I think if the state board would allow Dale and his team, in conjunction with Scott and the rest of the staff, to continue some of these conversations, I think there was a lot of good ideas that could come forth that we could really tweak and work together on. Just needed a little bit more time. So that would be my input.
So my input, this is Robert. I keep on introducing myself, and you guys know my voice now. But Weber is one of those that got slammed, and it was the reason why we got slammed is because we had a truth and taxation hearing, and we increased our local effort. And the hold harmless is not the way people think of it. The hold harmless basically is holding your total amount available, both state and local, harmless. And so, and if you don't make adjustments, that total amount slowly starts to slide. And so we had a truth and taxation a year ago and raised our voted leeway, and it didn't increase our state aid at all. In fact, our state aid dropped because our local effort went up. And so we had a truth and taxation for this express purpose of keeping steady, no new money. And that's hard. To have a truth and taxation with your public, and they say, so what are you doing this for? Oh, so we don't lose state money. What? You're raising our taxes so you don't lose state money? And I had discussions with Ben Leishman and other legislators that kind of got this ball rolling. I got all of our legislators together, and Ben Leishman said, yeah, he says that they're not losing any money in total, but their state money goes down and their local money goes up, and they'll quote held harmless. But we had a truth and taxation for no good reason that we could tell our public. And he said Alpine did this, and what they told their public is, we're raising your taxes by, we'll say, I can't remember what it was, we'll say $10 million, and we're getting 10 million less from the state now. And go talk to your state legislators. And Ben Leishman said, the legislative fiscal analyst said he was slammed with phone calls from his state legislators saying, what's going on here? You know, and then this kind of got this ball rolling on, and Dale's right, over the last several years, as appropriations have come up, beefing this funding up, Dale grapples, struggles not word, because I don't think Dale struggles, but he grapples with multi-layers of appropriations. And it would be so good to consolidate all those into one. It'd be more simple. And then the data, we as districts could budget a lot easier if we didn't find out in April or May, when the local collections are finalized in April or May, what our appropriation is. And so those are two easy fixes. But ultimately, the biggest fix in my mind is this hold harmless thing. Why are school districts forced to have a truth and taxation to avoid not a good reason? That is a really hard sell. if you've ever been through truth and taxation before, that's a really hard sell. And I don't think the state legislature gets it. And you state board members, unless you sat through truth and taxations, you might not quite understand either. But that would be, it's a difficult thing to tell your public. Yeah, we're raising your taxes so that we're not getting anything out of it. We're raising their taxes so that the state can cut their funding, you know, and that's a hard sell. But I like the changes thus far, and I echo what Tim says. I think that this is a great start, and we didn't have a lot of time. And kudos to the organization of Dale and Sam, Yuri, and Scott Jones. I think we're heading in the right direction. All I got.
Thank you both.
Oh, go ahead. It looks like we've got a couple of questions. Vice Chair Davis.
If we make this motion today, are there more recommendations that will be forthcoming from this group? As you've mentioned, there are additional tweaks or things that need to be made, or is there just an assumption that those things can and would be incorporated into this or for a future year?
I think from my perspective, it would be for future years. The conversations we'd have, like Dale said, they make significant changes. So there's things we'd have to work through. So I wouldn't anticipate it being soon.
Got it. Then I have a motion. I move that the committee recommend the board approve the voted and board work group recommendations as proposed in the presentation.
We have a question. Let's go ahead and listen to Committee Member Straight.
I definitely want to keep things rolling along. I guess I misunderstood. I thought it was new money. This is a reallocation. That's a little bit different now in my mind. We got to get past the roadblock of creating winners and losers. But let's keep this ball moving because it needs to be addressed, and we don't want to punish our LEAs for increasing their local contribution. But that's part of the issue with reallocation, right?
Yeah.
Anyway,
Board Member Straight, may I clarify, and this just goes to how complex the formula is. The way we calculated it would be new money on a one-time basis, but there is a question because the legislature only has so much money that they can appropriate. So would they, if they were going to say, let's say allocate $30 million to this program anyways, would they just make 20 of those million one time, then add $10 million? So I don't want to contradict Tim.
Yeah, well, it creates a cliff.
Well, right. And so, but the way we calculated the 33 million would be if, for example, and I mean, Tim can actually attest to this. If we rolled back the clock for 2 years, I think 15 of that million would be Davis, right? Because they're just how they fell in the formula. So Davis would be held at what they would have gotten anyways. And so they're not getting more, and so other districts might be getting more than they would have otherwise, but Davis would at least be held to what they would have gotten otherwise. Okay. And that's part of the 33 million. So that's a new funding request. I didn't want to, do you agree, Tim, or am I?
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. I didn't think about the districts that would be getting more under the new formula. We're not going to bring them back to what they would have gotten. And so that's why it's new money.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'm good. This is definitely a good process, and we need to keep it rolling forward. So I definitely support it, and I just need to understand it even better, it sounds like. So, but I'm trying.
Deputy Superintendent Jones.
My advice, Madam Chair, my advice to the committee is to do an and to oh my gosh, Board Member Davis's motion. That the committee moved that the board approve and direct staff to create a request for funding. Does that make sense, Dale, to you too, what I'm saying?
So
okay.
Moved.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, ma'am.
Okay. Committee Member Bogus.
Thank you, ma'am. I would just move to amend the motion and copy and paste the language from the slide so that we have clarity. Or maybe language that says as notated in the slideshow, slide number, whatever. So what we're looking at right here is what's included in the motion.
I think it will be in backup on that.
Cindy, I don't know if you're speaking, but I can't hear
Sorry,
you.
I think it will be in backup in the, when it comes out to the,
So when the motion comes before us again, this is what we're gonna see, is this language that I'm looking at on my screen right here. Because what we discussed is not necessarily limited to what's on the screen. And so I just want to make certain that what we're voting on is very clearly delineated.
yeah, we're voting, we're gonna send this to the full board. And I'm fine if we want to reference this, put the verbiage in, but I think it will just, I think it will be in backup for everyone to see. Either way is fine with me, though.
Chair
Whatever y'all
Moss.
want to do.
Thanks. I just want to say I support moving this forward. There's been a lot of work and really appreciate the recommendations. I still, like everybody, this complicated. I've got, a few things I need to dig in on before the full board meeting so that I can intelligently, discuss that. But I do support it and at least take me to the next step. We got to get this in the hopper and continue to have a discussion. So thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Cammie, for bringing this onto our screen. I think we maybe even need to add, Deputy Superintendent Jones had mentioned right after adopt and add and direct staff. Is that in here? Oh, it's right there. Okay, sorry.
I didn't get his exact words, but he said that the board approve and direct staff. What was the rest of it, sir?
The committee recommends that the board approve. Well, the committee recommends that the board approve. I don't know, Dale, not approve the presentation, but approve the
recommendation to direct staff to.
Yeah.
So right before the column, to direct staff to, and then you can get rid of the first direct staff. So consolidate vote and board calculations onto a single, so you get rid of that. And then I think in create a funding policy request is now clear. Do you agree, Deputy Superintendent?
I do. Well, I would say the committee recommends, I would recommend that the committee recommend that the board approve the voted in board work group recommendation and direct staff to 1 and 2. Is that okay, Dale? Yep.
Okay. All right.
Please,
So
ma'am.
committee members, the motion is that the committee recommends that the board approve the voted and board work group recommendations and direct staff to consolidate the voted and board calculations into a single spreadsheet tab. And number 2, create a funding policy request to consolidate state funding allocations from 6 to 2 and B, base program calculations on 2-year prior tax rates and collections. Correct? All right. Committee members, if you'll go ahead and please vote. All right, it looks like that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And we're so grateful for our staff and especially for our guests. for leaning in and walking us through this. We know you have combined hundreds of years of finance expertise, and you walked us through it. So you're also educators. Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Hang on, I am moving things around. Are we going to number? Yes, go ahead, Deputy Superintendent Jones.
Madam Chair, I recommend that we go to item number 12.
Good.
Education Service RESA funding request, followed by item number 11, and that we move the school land trust information item to September meeting. So,
Okay.
and if I may, ma'am, I'll get started on this one.
Yes, please go ahead on number 12.
Right, so if the finance committee members will recall, the board recently allocated $250,000 to other RESAs in support of their having literacy coaches. Since then, we've worked closely with the SESC RESA. Director Erickson is online. Also, Director Straight from the other RESAs is online as well, or from his RESA is online as well, to offer any clarifications or additional insight to this. Staff are recommending that the committee consider providing $324,000 from the same source to the SESC RESA, but also, ask Director Erickson if there's the potential for any offsetting funds from them to offset the 324 before you decide to do that. Because as you recall too, the $250,000 was brought forward after those RESAs had looked internally for their funding. So we want to apply the same kind of standards, if you will, to this RESA as well. But in order to hire two coaches, one full-time coach for San Juan District, a half-time position for Emory, and then a half-time position for a charter school that they support, the SESC supports, Pinnacle, it would cost, we estimate $324,000. So that's $157,000 per position. So $157,000 times 2 is $314,000. 320, the additional 10,000 is for travel, supplies, materials, things like that. I concur with those calculations. In fact, we gave the amounts of what it typically costs for us to pay, all things considered, salary, benefits for a literacy coach. So at this time, I'll defer to you, Madam Chair, if you want to call on Director Erickson for additional information for the committee. But again, we're just seeking, and we would pay for it at your direction, the board's direction, from the same source that $250,000 is coming from, which is that tax delay funding, which, and Deborah can correct me if I'm wrong, but we still have considerable balances there. So $324,000 or any less of amount is feasible from the tax delay funding, as was the $250,000. So with that, Madam Chair, if you'd like to call on Director Erickson for additional input and or Director Straight, I think that would be beneficial to the committee to start with Director Erickson.
Yes, I would appreciate if we could welcome in Director Erickson and also bring in Director Straight and have him available if there are any additional questions. But yeah, let's turn the time over to Director Erickson. Thank you.
Well, good morning and almost good afternoon, I would say. So just kind of a reminder of a study that was done throughout our RESAs. We had determined that the coaches we had at one point through the ESSER funds, we had influence on 675 teachers. In addition to that, we learned through the assessment or through the survey that 8 in 10 teachers served agreed, the early learning coaches are an excellent use of the Utah taxpayers' dollars. And then I would finally say that coaching support, 80% of the teachers served satisfied with the development they have received from their coach. So we know this is impacting our teachers. It's certainly impacting students. To speak to SCSE, we're just looking to try and help bring in funding to assist us moving forward, as we've had really good support through the ESSER funds. We just want to make sure we have some early learning coaches moving forward to help facilitate that learning, and hence the recommendation of $324,000 that we've determined. Is there a chance we could have some funding to contribute? I believe there possibly might be. That would be a conversation I would like to have with our board and dialogue that to see where we would be after we learn where you're looking as far as our service center goes.
Thank you very much, Director Erickson. Did you want to add anything onto that, Director Straight?
Can you hear me?
I can, thanks.
Okay. So I've talked with Shane. Q's has available, I believe it's $57,493 that we have in the Utah grant system, that I've talked with Jennifer Thronson, that we would be willing to redo our Utah grants submission and send $57,000 to SCSE to help out with this project, to keep it going for the additional year while we explore the business case. I'm not sure if Shane talked about those funds that he and I have talked about, but we're willing to start that process so that you could subtract that from the 324, and it would bring it more in line with what the board had given to the news RISA.
Is that pending this afternoon's prioritization, or not prioritization, but this afternoon with our full board on your RISA case?
Yes. So as this would be an additional year, with us knowing that if the legislature, doesn't approve that, if the legislature doesn't approve, the business case for the early learning coaches, we know that this is the last year of those funds for early learning coaches. But we would, we have the funding, the $57,000 that we can send right now for this year. And so you would subtract that $57,000 from the 324 that Director Erickson is asking for. And that would put it more in line with what the money that the board did send to news.
Yeah, Madam Chair, that would be $267,000.
Okay, thank you. I see a question from Board Chair Moss.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just getting ready to go up to the legislature again. I think we talked about this last time, but we made a hard run for some additional funding for literacy coaches at PEA, and then tried to go into EAC after PEA didn't want to provide the money requested. The feedback we got was universally positive about RISAs generally and about the literacy coaches, and we made that a prominent part of our presentation and some behind the scenes discussions. And so I think that was, pretty much unanimous. The thing they just kept pushing back on was the districts and charters, their members should be funding this, right? And so I think, there will be the same resistance. And I'm just curious kind of how that's being prepared to address the objection. Have there been requests? Because I think you guys all know what a big fan I am of RISAs. All of us are. I mean, this is a brilliant part of our, landscape. But, there was several efforts and several elements of pushback on that particular element. So what's the lay of the land there in terms of being able to get this from members either this year or next? Is this kind of a one-time thing and then phase into members that will support? I think we had the same discussion with the other REISs, but you know, again, we're on your side here. We want to just make sure we addressed what we got in terms of pushback last year.
Chair Moss,
Go ahead.
I guess, oh, I'm sorry, Chair Norton.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
Could I bring in Superintendent Willis from Paiute School District to address Chair Moss's question?
That would be excellent.
Thank you.
Welcome, Superintendent Willis. Glad to have you here.
Thank you. Just to address the question about it being, you know, the school district should be contributing to the REISs to offer those literacy coaches. SB 127 put what was a statewide goal. It wasn't necessarily driven by a local school board decision, which is why we feel like as a state, we're putting lots of money into literacy. On the Wasatch Front, there's not a lot of coaches in the rural districts. And so a lot of the support that's being provided for SB 127 is concentrated on the Wasatch Front. And so the REISs are a great way to push that same statewide objective to the regional service centers. I would also just say that the service centers in general are a way to push out some of those statewide objectives. And SB 127 is just a great example of how we can fulfill that and how it's working to get to even the most remote schools. We can reach them through this, where the local districts might not participate at that level if it's left to the local board decision.
Quick follow-up, Chair.
Of course.
Is there some disparity then in terms of, you know, the money that's getting to the rurals versus the Wasatch Front as part of that 127 push? Because I support and agree with your concept. Is that something that has been quantified in a way that might help the pitch?
I think as we've re-evaluated the pitch for early learning coaches, and if Jennifer Thronson was available, she could answer this, or Sarah Young, Chief of Staff. As we've written the business case and worked with Chair Norton on developing this, what we are seeing is most of the coaches, the early literacy coaches to implement SB 127, the focus has been on the Wasatch Front. And granted, there is a higher need right through those areas for those funds. But as we studied Senate Bill 127, it talks about a regional effort for literacy goals and implementation of letters. We have been meeting SB 127 with the early learning coaches that we had through this pilot program. And what we've done is we're now switching and providing data showing within our local LEAs the benefit of the letters training and the implementation of early literacy and working with teachers in helping students to increase their proficiency rates in literacy and numeracy. And so we don't want to take anything away from what is happening on the Wasatch Front. We just would like the opportunity to share data to show what we're doing with the early learning coaches for the legislature to reconsider funding those positions, because it is a statewide initiative, not so much a local initiative.
Thank you. And you know, we shared some good ROI data last year, and I don't think there was any dispute about it. It was again more than that question of getting the local contribution. So I think some of what you're talking about is probably an important part of the reason. And that question will be asked again. You know, why won't the districts cover it? Why can't they? Whatever. But it sounds like that thought has gone into the pitch. So thank you.
Committee Member Bogus.
Thank you, ma'am. I have a question, and I'm not certain to whom I should direct it, so I'm going to ask it and maybe you can disseminate it. We had discussed when when our first Reese's regional center came and asked for funding for this, we had discussed that this was going to be something where it created a domino effect, and then we'd have request after request after request. And as I'm thinking about just being fiscally prudent, how many more Reese's are going to come asking for money? And I mean that as a genuine question, because as I look at this, it doesn't bother me. What bothers me is the idea that it could add up to $2 million eventually. So I get concerned about that. And I thought also, I could be wrong, but my recollection says that there was a deadline to request this money, and that deadline has since passed. So if that recollection is incorrect, I would like some clarification there.
Madam Chair, I can take that.
Okay, go ahead.
So to answer Board Member Bogus's question, I'm not aware of any deadline that was imposed for the Reese's to make requests for one-time funding for this fiscal year for this specific purpose, other than what it would have been associated with the grant process. But that's been explained too. So then to your question, to Board Member Bogus's question, Madam Chair, regarding is this it? This is it. Basically the news piece with the 250,000 and this one would be the only amounts of money that we would ever put in front of the board for you to consider for fiscal year 24 one-time money. There is, of course, the request for funding that you'll see later today in your study session 2 to 4 for state fiscal year 25. But this is it for state fiscal year 24. One-time money. Last consideration is this one for the SESC. Does that answer Board Member Bogus's questions or address her concerns, Madam Chair? Sorry, I'm speaking fast.
Yep, I think that's great. Go ahead, Vice Chair Davis.
I had almost the exact questions as Member Bogus, word for word, including that I had remembered some kind of a deadline. So thank you for helping me rewrap my head around all of this. I think I'm going to go ahead and make the motion, understanding that nobody else will come and ask for this specific amount of money, and that it won't be a situation again next year, even if the legislature chooses not to fund. This is going to be it. So unless we as a committee or we have the funds, or there's some other conversation that we can fund salaries for folks.
Can I clarify on that? The reason that we are doing it this year is because the legislature did not fund last year. We fully anticipate that will change, but we can't talk too much about 2025 at this point. So let's just go with this.
Yeah. But if it doesn't, I'm just saying there's a chance this will not be an ongoing salary forever.
Most
I just
definitely.
think that needs to be
right. And that's why we put together the legislative request for ongoing.
Yes, and I'll make the motion now, just saying that we were all fully supportive of the goals of the funds the last time, and in the interest of time, won't go into all of the frothing over the great things that these reading instructional coaches do, but they do really great work. The committee recommends that the board approve one-time funds from the tax delay balances in the amount of $267,000 for the purpose of the SESC RESA hiring or retaining 2 literacy coaches for school fiscal year 24.
Okay, committee members, the motion before this group is that the committee recommends that the board approve one-time funds from the tax delay balance in the amount of $267,000 for the purpose of the SESC RESA hiring or retaining 2 literacy coaches for SFY 24. Committee members, if you'll go ahead and please vote. I do not know why Brent does not come up on my computer. Cami, can you see?
He shows yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you very much. So that passes unanimously. Board members, it is 12:13 and our meeting would end at 12:15. We are going to push I think you already said that, would push land trust to the September meeting. So unless Deputy Superintendent Jones tells me otherwise, I think we are ready for a motion to adjourn.
Oh, can we do number 11?
We have to do number
Jared
11,
Morton?
ma'am.
I'm so sorry, Greg. Yes, of course.
I'll make
just
it.
Thought we
wait.
were, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
I just need, it says I can't share while somebody else is sharing, and I'm fine if somebody else wants to share, but here we go. The legislature is seeking the board's recommendation on the upcoming sunset for the Intensive Services Fund, which is found in 53F-2-420. Essentially, what this code does is it allows the Utah State Board of Education to make some rules regarding a pilot program for intensive services funding that would provide funding to any eligible student, which would be a student who has IEP needs that exceed 3 times the statewide average pupil expenditures. The USB has made rule in regards to this code, and that rule allows for the distribution of funds to schools up to about 10K, and it depends on their need. If we were to allow this particular code 53F-2-420 to be repealed, we would still have our rule in effect. The USB would continue to use federal funds, the IDEA funds, to provide the sub-grants to LEAs that have significant expenses for students, and also LEAs would not have to submit paperwork to apply for these intensive services funds. The USB staff would not have to review the paperwork to award the intensive services funds, and we wouldn't have to run the complicated formula that we currently use to distribute the funds. Currently, USB is undertaking a study with the West Ed team to study expenditures in special ed funding and reimbursement. Currently, what we're finding is the fiscal statements aren't matching up with the need that's being requested. And so Dr. Voorhees and her team are using this study to take a look at the field to ensure that we are going to be distributing funds correctly, and that LEAs are both accounting and using their unrestricted and restricted funds correctly. So there's no mistakes as we're currently seeing. Our recommendation to this committee is to put forward to the board that they recommend that the board not oppose the repeal of 53F-2-420, as we would still be able to do the things that we were entrusted to do with that particular code as our rule still stands. We are happy to take any questions. We have Dr. Voorhees with us. And so if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. It looks like we do have a question from Vice Chair Davis.
Yeah, thank you. I expect someone will make this motion and that it will pass. I think a lot of people are frustrated with this, the history and the way this is. I cannot make the motion and I won't be voting for it because I believe there is a need for it. And I believe that, you know, there are people, when you look at 3 times the amount of the typical cost before, we've had like $3 million to offer these folks. And there was like millions more need than that. And even when they did apply, they had to already show the LEAs that they had supplemented a bunch in the middle and then could only apply for the overage. And even still, then we were looking at like over $13 million of need. And so I personally can't walk in to Dan Peterson School every month. I go there every single month. It's my happy place. I'm on the represent their SCC committee. And I can't walk in knowing that I voted no to get rid of this when the need is still there. But I will say the fund has been problematic. The formulas have been problematic. They've not been equitable. They've been frustrating to LEAs, frustrating to our staff, sounds like frustrating to the legislature. My personal preference would instead be to wait until the West Ed funding is complete and then look at overall funding requests for self-contained students, really. That's what I'm hearing from LEAs the most, is that we need additional funding for self-contained students, whether that comes through a higher intensive services offset or just we get it figured out for self-contained students once we get the West Ed study. But I get that it's been a frustration to a lot of people. But I'll be voting no.
Thank you. Chair Moss.
Thanks. I'll be quick. Just to clarify, I love the reduction of paperwork, reporting, et cetera, of course. Is the recommendation because the funding is not there currently, and so, you know, don't continue the formalities and then come back and revisit based on what comes out of the West Ed study? Is that certainly the need is there? Member Davis knows this field much better than I do. And I'm interested in seeing what comes out of that study. But is that the short-term recommendation? The money's not there from the legislature, so, you know, kind of eliminate these parts of the program pending reconsideration?
Chair Norton, may I respond?
Thank you. Please do.
Leah Voorhees, Assistant Superintendent of Student Support. Chair Moss, so this particular program was just over $300,000 for 3 years as the pilot. So it's a very small amount of money, and the cost benefit analysis to the LEAs to do the application to figure out, you know, which students to send has not been there because it's such a small amount of money. However, Neil Stevens, who's also on the call, and Tammy Gear and I, we, knowing that this was coming, we rearranged the IDEA budget a little to be able to provide a cushion for at least this amount of money to LEAs who had students who had high cost needs, so that they could apply for one student who had a high cost need, instead of going through all the paperwork of this program and the formulas. If an LEA had a student that they couldn't budget for because the student showed up after they'd budgeted, et cetera, we have put a cushion in our IDEA budget to be able to account for that, to hold us over until we have more information from the West Ed study. And I have shared with special education directors that we would be bringing this to your attention, and this would be our recommendation, and that we had a plan B. Does that answer your question, Chair Moss?
Yeah, thank you very much. And with that, I was going to bring a motion, but I see Chair Davis's or Vice Chair Davis's hand up though.
I was going to say, you can bring the motion and then we can just ask her question.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, well, I will move then that the committee not oppose the repeal of 53F-2-420. Knowing that there are other, you know, considerations in the works and other ideas that will be brought forward.
Okay, Vice Chair Davis.
Yeah, I just want to quickly add a little background, and I don't, it's not in contrary to what Dr. Voorhees has said, because I have the utmost respect for her and what she's gone through with this thing. I just want to add, though, that we knew a few years ago when we did this pilot, and it was only put in place as a last ditch effort. Thank you to someone that you are familiar with, Representative Jeff Moss, to save the intensive services program so that we could get more information and do an overall funding study and make this into something that would have more equitable formulas and more adequate funding for the LEAs that are spending massive amounts of money on intensive services. And so when we said, well, it's going to be $300,000 per year for 3 years, it was pretty much almost dead in the water then, unless we would have been able to get the study completed on time. And we didn't, and we haven't. But I don't think that our voice should be silent once we get things figured out from West Ed. And I certainly hope they are studying intensive services as part of their overall look at special ed funding. But we may need to, I fear that when this dies, the door will be closed forever and we won't be able to get that figured out. But I will keep a little flame of hope alive and we'll go from there.
Okay, I have just had a little technical problem and I no longer I can hear our meeting, but I can no longer see our meeting. So are there any other questions or any hands raised?
I don't see any, Chair.
Okay, thank you. All right, and Vice Chair Davis, can you please repeat the motion and call for the vote?
Yes, I'm not making it, but I'll repeat it.
Okay, yeah. No, Chair Moss has already made the motion.
Yes, it is the finance. Oh, I'm back on SCSC. It is recommended that the board not oppose the repeal of 53F-2-420. Moved by Member Moss, Chair Moss.
Okay, board members, if you will go ahead and please vote.
Chair Norton.
I am voting yes.
Okay, I see a you are yes, and Member Bogus is a yes, and Chair Moss is a yes. Member Straight. I don't see a vote for you up. I'm a no.
I see a yes. I see a yes for board member Straight, ma'am.
Okay, so it's a 4-1 vote with Member Davis voting in opposition. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
All right, Cammie, do you have everything you need from us?
I do, thank you.
All right. Thank you all. Thank you, Scott, Cammie, and the entire finance staff for this great job you've done today. It's 11:25. We have a meeting that starts in 35 minutes, and we made it through a huge agenda. I appreciate you all. Committee members, you're the best, the very, very best. That was awesome. All right.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you,
Let's have oh, yes, go ahead. I was just gonna have-
thanking you.
Chair.
Could we just check right after and see why you can't see me?
I can see you now. I just couldn't see your vote. It was at the top of the screen.
Oh, okay. So
Okay.
I'm not doing something wrong on this end. Okay.
Okay.
You got a nice halo going on, actually.
Okay.
I'm
Motion
not
to
close.
dismiss.
So moved.
Okay.
For a second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. See ya. Bye.